Imagine walking up to your own front door right now. You know, you put your key in the lock, but the lock has completely changed.
Right.
The door opens, and there is this slightly upgraded, flawless version of you standing there. I mean, this person is wearing your clothes, they're smelling of your exact signature perfume, and they are wearing your wedding ring.
It's the ultimate nightmare, really.
It is. And when you demand to know what on earth is going on, they just look at you with this total blankness and tell you that you don't exist.
Yeah, they literally look right through you.
Exactly. So today, we are doing a deep dive into a psychological thriller that asks a truly terrifying question. If if you lose your phone, your keys, and the recognition of your own spouse, how do you legally or physically prove that you are actually you?
It's such a brilliant premise because it's the complete weaponization of identity.
Yes, weaponized identity, exactly. We're looking at a story where a woman's entire existence, her home, her husband, her actual reality is seamlessly stolen from her in the span of just a 1-hour evening run.
And what we're looking at here, it's not just a standard thriller about a home invasion. It's a really profound exploration of how fragile the architecture of our lives actually is.
Right, because we build these massive, supposedly permanent structures around ourselves.
We do. I mean, we buy houses, we get married, we curate these extended digital footprints, and we just assume all those things make us real. And this narrative takes a total sledgehammer to that assumption.
A total sledgehammer. So let's establish the scene. We are dropped into this location on October 30th in a very remote, very picturesque coastal village that is ironically named Hope Falls.
Down in Cornwall.
Right, down in Cornwall. And the setting immediately does so much heavy lifting for the story. Hope Falls is flanked by this immense dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean on one side.
And the ancient wild Blackmore moorland on the other. It's a geographical trap.
That's the perfect way to put it. There is literally only one road in and one road out. It feels like this island gigantism scenario, but applied to human psychology.
Yeah, because when you isolate people geographically like that, the rules of reality can be bent in ways that, frankly, wouldn't survive 10 minutes in a bustling city.
Precisely.
The isolation creates this closed ecosystem. I mean, think about it. In a city like London, if someone locks you out of your house, you have neighbors you see every day.
Right. You have the barista at the coffee shop who knows your face.
Exactly.
Right.
Public transit cameras, a whole web of ambient surveillance and casual social connections that anchor your identity. But Hope Falls strips all of that away entirely.
It's a required ingredient for the total erasure of a human being.
And we experience this closed ecosystem entirely through the perspective of Eden Fox.
Right, Eden. She is a shy 30-something artist who recently moved from a flat in London to this incredibly dramatic cliffside house called Spyglass.
Which she made the move to with her charismatic, older CEO husband, Harrison Wolfe.
Yes, Harrison. But long before the crime actually takes place, we get this picture of a woman who is profoundly isolated.
We really have to look at the psychology of her vulnerability here. Eden has spent the last 18 years of her life as a full-time caregiver.
Right. She dedicated everything to raising a daughter who required 24/7 care, and that daughter has only recently moved out.
And when a person spends almost 2 decades in that kind of hyper-vigilant caregiving mode, their own social muscles just atrophy.
They completely wither away. Eden is totally out of practice interacting with the world on her own behalf.
She even describes herself as painfully shy. She has no local friends in Cornwall, no independent support network, and is, honestly, almost entirely dependent on Harrison to interface with the world for her.
She is the absolute definition of a soft target.
Yeah, if you wanted to erase someone, you would absolutely pick someone who has already partially erased herself to serve others.
But, she is trying to fight back against that social anxiety. She goes out for a run at sunset, and the text gives us this incredibly vivid sensory experience of her run.
Oh, the imagery is fantastic. You can practically feel that cold, crisp autumnal air slapping her face.
And the intense, briny smell of the sea flooding her senses. She runs past this waterfall that actually gives Hope Falls its name, but, and this is a key detail, she notes there's a suicide hotline poster permanently affixed to the rock right next to the water.
That detail is such a brilliant subversion of the picturesque.
It really is.
Because Hope Falls looks like a postcard, right?
Yeah.
But the presence of that poster signals this very fatalistic underbelly.
It reminds you in Eden that the beauty of this place is actually quite dangerous.
Yeah, the cliffs are steep, the water is freezing, and, well, People come here to end things.
Right. And for Eden, the physical act of running is this purge. She's literally trying to outrun her anxieties.
She's terrified about her upcoming art exhibition that very night. And she's really burdened by these nagging worries about her husband's recent emotional distance.
So the running triggers a release of endorphins, right? It gives her this momentary sense of biological control.
Exactly. So she does her loop. She gets that chemical release. She feels cleansed. She runs back up the steep hill to her gorgeous cliffside home, Spyglass.
And she sees Harrison's expensive car in the driveway, which, gives her this immediate hit of dopamine.
She walks up to the door, takes out her key, and I love this detail. The key is attached to a keychain Harrison gave her that reads, "Love you to the moon and back."
It's so emotionally loaded. But then she puts the key in and it doesn't fit into the lock.
It is the literal mechanical failure of reality.
Yeah.
Think about the neurobiology of routine. Your brain automates the process of unlocking your front door to conserve energy.
Right, you don't even look at the keyhole half the time.
Exactly. So when the pinions in the lock do not engage, it triggers this immediate, massive cognitive dissonance. The physical world is just rejecting a deeply programmed expectation.
It forces the brain completely out of autopilot and into an immediate state of alarm. So Eden thinks it's a joke, like maybe a weird prank. She actually knocks on her own front door.
And the door is open, but not by her husband.
No, it's opened by a woman, this older, much more polished, incredibly confident woman who looks disturbingly similar to Eden.
And the imposter is wearing Eden's clothes. She is wearing the specific, vintage black velvet dress that Eden had meticulously planned to wear to her exhibition that night.
Which is just so incredibly violating. But it goes much deeper than just the dress, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The imposter smells of Eden's signature perfume, and most chillingly of all, she is wearing Eden's engagement and wedding rings.
The very rings that Eden specifically took off and left in a little dish inside the house before her run.
Because her fingers swell when she exercises, yeah.
It's such a specific, intimate theft. Now, this is where I really struggle personally, because if this is me, I am immediately picking up a rock and smashing a window. I mean, I am making a huge scene.
You want to, sure.
So why does Eden just stand there?
Well, you think you would smash a window, but you really have to account for the shock of spatial dominance.
Spatial dominance.
Yeah, the imposter hasn't just entered Eden's house. She has effectively colonized Eden's aesthetic and sensory space.
Wow, colonized. That's a strong word for it.
But it's true. Scent, for instance, is deeply tied to the olfactory bulb, which connects directly to the brain's memory centers.
So by wearing the dress and the perfume, the imposter is actually hijacking Eden's sensory identity.
Exactly. It induces a total freeze response.
Yeah.
Eden's brain is just struggling to process an impossible visual and olfactory input. It's a hostile takeover of a human identity, executed with terrifying intimacy.
The intimacy is definitely what makes it so violent. It's like a physical form of biometric failure.
That's a great comparison.
Right. Because when your thumbprint is suddenly rejected by your phone, you feel a brief flash of panic. But here, the actual house rejects you, and your clothes are literally on someone else's body.
But Eden does push back, eventually.
She does. She literally puts her foot in the door to stop the imposter from closing it. She is furious, and she demands to know where her husband is.
And then Harrison walks down the hallway.
Which should be the moment of salvation.
Should be. Because this is the crux of the nightmare. If your physical environment rejects you, your spouse is supposed to be the psychological anchor that pulls you back to safety.
Right. In attachment theory, your spouse is your primary secure base.
But Harrison walks right up, sees Eden, the woman he's been married to for years, the woman he, christened the kitchen counter with just weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he just puts a protective arm around the imposter.
He stares blankly at the real Eden. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look confused. He just looks entirely empty.
And he says, "This is our home. I don't know you. Please leave."
And he slams the door.
Harrison's action is the final blow that completely shatters Eden's reality. Our sense of self is just so heavily constructed by how others perceive us.
I think the sociologist Charles Cooley called it the looking glass self, right?
Yes. We develop our identity based on our understanding of how others view us. So when the person who knows you most intimately looks at you with zero recognition, the cognitive dissonance is so extreme, it practically mimics the onset of psychosis.
The betrayal isn't just that he is cheating or lying.
No, the betrayal is that he is actively participating in her ontological destruction. He is looking at her and saying, "You do not exist."
I really want you listening to this right now to try and imagine the mechanics of that moment. I mean, think of the one person who anchors your reality. Your partner, your parent, your best friend.
I picture it.
Imagine them looking right through you with genuine, chilling emptiness in their eyes, claiming a total stranger is you. How quickly would your own sense of sanity crumble?
Very quickly. You wouldn't immediately think, a complex conspiracy is afoot.
Not at all. You would think, am I having a stroke? Did I die on my run and now I'm a ghost? Am I actually insane?
Exactly. The human brain will almost always doubt its own sanity before it accepts that a loved one is executing a sociopathic conspiracy. The self-doubt is truly the most insidious weapon being used against her.
But then, right before the narrative allows us to watch Eden unravel completely on that cold doorstep, we experience this massive, jarring, structural shift.
The story just abruptly pulls us out of October 30th.
It's a hard shift in time, plunging us 6 months into the past. We transition into a completely different narrative thread, and we are introduced to our second protagonist, Olivia Bird.
Who goes by the name Birdie.
Right, Birdie, and she serves as a phenomenal foil to Eden, doesn't she?
Oh, she really does. Where Eden is very soft, anxious, and largely defined by her caregiving and relationships. Birdie is 40 years old, hardened by trauma, and fiercely, fiercely private.
Visually, she is super striking. She has heavy tattoos, most notably this very distinct swallow tattooed on her right hand,
And she lives in the heart of London, in a tiny pedestrian lane called Cecil Court.
which is famous for its antiquarian bookshops, right? Her flat is directly above a bookshop dedicated entirely to Alice's adventures in Wonderland.
Which is just such an elegant thematic indicator. Because just like Alice, Birdie's about to fall down a rabbit hole where the foundational rules of reality are completely inverted.
But unlike Alice, Birdie's descent is not whimsical at all. It is brutal.
Extremely brutal. We first meet Birdie in this highly sterile, terrifying environment, inside an MRI machine.
She is incredibly claustrophobic, and the text gives us this intimate access to her internal monologue, which is cold, biting, and heavily, heavily guarded by sarcasm.
The MRI machine is actually a fascinating parallel to the geographical isolation of Hope Falls.
Oh, how so?
Well, an MRI tube is the ultimate physical confinement. You are totally immobilized in a magnetic tunnel, subjected to deafening mechanical noise, while the machine looks straight through your skin and bone to the absolute truth of your biology.
That's a great point. And Birdie uses sarcasm as this sort of cognitive shield against the vulnerability of that machine.
Right. She hates being touched by the nurses. She hates the forced clinical empathy of the hospital staff.
When the staff casually asks what she does for a living, she lies effortlessly and says she works in admin.
But her internal thoughts reveal she actually lives a life of crime. She explicitly states that her life choices have forced her to, quote, flick off her feelings like a light.
That phrase, flick off her feelings like a light, is so evocative.
It's a perfect description of emotional blunting, which is a very common neurological response to severe prolonged trauma.
Because when a person exists in high-stress, dangerous environments for a long time, the brain downregulates the amygdala, right?
Exactly, to prevent the person from being paralyzed by fear or empathy. Birdie has literally rewired her brain to survive.
But all of that armor is completely useless against the threat she is facing in that hospital room.
Because the doctor comes in and delivers a terminal diagnosis. Multiple tumors. It's aggressive, and it's everywhere.
And when Birdie asks how much time she has, the doctor simply says, not long.
We really have to contrast Birdie's crisis with Eden's crisis here. Eden is experiencing an unreliable reality. Her husband, her home, her environment are all betraying her from the outside in.
Right. Well, Birdie is experiencing an unreliable body.
Yes. Her own cellular structure is mutating and betraying her from the inside out. In both cases, these women are facing a sudden, catastrophic loss of sovereignty over their very existence.
Birdie's hardened emotional armor can protect her from other people, but it absolutely cannot protect her from her own biology.
So Birdie leaves the hospital and walks back into the bustling streets of London. Her world has just ended, but the city keeps moving around her.
She goes back to her flat above the bookshop to the only creature she truly allows herself to love, her massive Siberian husky named Sunday, whom she actually rescued from a shoebox years ago.
She is sitting there, in the silence of her flat, just processing the absolute certainty of her impending death. And then there's a knock on the door.
This is where the machinery of the plot really begins to turn. Standing at her door is a middle-aged solicitor.
And he brings news that feels entirely disconnected from her current reality.
Right. He tells her that a grandmother Bertie never even knew existed has recently passed away, and this unknown grandmother has left Bertie a historic property down in Cornwall.
The name of the property is Spyglass.
And suddenly, the two timelines become gravitationally bound to one another.
It's a brilliant collision course.
But I have to push back on the sheer convenience of this, though. I mean, a woman gets a terminal diagnosis, and on that exact same day, a solicitor knocks on her door to hand her the keys to a mansion. It feels like the universe is playing a really cruel trick on her.
Oh, it does feel like a cruel trick, but it's also a classic convention of the psychological thriller. The arrival of the inheritance functions as an inciting incident that forces a character in stasis to move.
Because otherwise, Bertie is just ready to sit in her flat and die.
Exactly. The inheritance of Spyglass is the only mechanism powerful enough to pull her out of London and send her down into the geographical trap of Hope Falls.
So Spyglass is really the architectural anchor of the whole mystery. It is this haunted magnet pulling these two desperate, broken women toward it across a 6-month divide.
But before we can actually follow Bertie onto a train to Cornwall, the narrative violently snaps us right back to the present.
We return to October 30th, to the freezing, pouring rain, where Eden is still crouching in the bushes outside Spyglass.
The shift back to Eden highlights the immediate, visceral, physical peril of her situation. She is locked out in the storm, completely vulnerable.
And right after Harrison slammed the door, a police car pulled up. Out steps Sergeant Carter. He is a young, handsome, slightly arrogant local cop.
And what happens next is just a masterclass in gaslighting and manipulation, executed absolutely flawlessly by Harrison.
Eden watches from the bushes as Harrison comes out to speak to the officer, and he lies with terrifying ease.
He tells Sergeant Carter that Eden, the very woman shivering in the bushes, is an unhinged stalker who has been harassing them.
He claims she is trying to imitate his wife, who is, very conveniently, inside suffering from a migraine.
Harrison weaponizes his socioeconomic status with surgical precision here.
How so? Like just by looking the part?
Mostly, yeah. He leverages his image as a wealthy, composed, well-dressed older CEO against the hypothetical image of a frantic, wildly claiming woman in wet running gear.
Ah, I see.
He knows that law enforcement, whether consciously or unconsciously, very often equates wealth and calmness with credibility and equates emotional distress with instability.
And Carter buys it completely. He doesn't ask for ID. He doesn't even ask to check the house.
No, he even brags to Harrison about Hope Falls having the lowest crime rate in Cornwall, completely oblivious to the fact that a massive existential crime is occurring right in front of him.
It is the ultimate failure of institutional protection.
Carter represents the law, the supposedly objective arbiter of reality. So when the law aligns itself with the abuser, the victim is entirely hopelessly isolated.
So Eden realizes she can't just jump out of the bushes and scream. If she does, Carter will arrest her based entirely on Harrison's narrative.
She'd be locked in a cell as a stalker before midnight.
So she stays hidden. She waits until Harrison gets into his Porsche and drives away. And then, driven by just sheer desperation, she follows him down the steep hill toward the village.
She follows him right to the saltwater gallery.
The gallery is the site of her highly anticipated, deeply personal first art exhibition, the exhibition that she was so terrified of attending earlier that day.
And this scene is just agonizing to witness. Eden stands outside the gallery in the freezing rain looking through the glass windows.
The place is completely packed with the local elite, and standing in the center of the room, wearing Eden's vintage dress, holding a glass of wine, is the imposter.
She is giving a charming, flawless speech. She is using Eden's name.
She is standing in front of Eden's paintings.
And she publicly raises a glass to her Harry, thanking him for being the best husband in the world.
This elevates the crime from a private theft to a completely public erasure.
It really delves into the psychology of social validation. If an entire room of people, the gallery owner, the art patrons, the local community, collectively agree that the woman in the black dress is Eden Fox, the artist, well, the objective truth of Eden standing out in the rain becomes irrelevant.
Because reality in a social setting is a consensus, not a fact.
Exactly.
And Eden finally snaps. The cognitive dissonance gives way to pure, unadulterated rage. She pushes her way into the gallery, ready to tear the place apart, to scream her name and confront them both.
But before she can reach the center of the room, a hand grabs her arm.
It's Sergeant Carter. He's tracked her down.
He escorts her to the local police station, which is just this tiny converted fisherman's cottage.
And this begins an interrogation sequence that introduces one of the most terrifying, uniquely modern concepts in thriller literature.
Eden is sitting in this cold little room, dripping wet, trembling, just begging Carter to believe her.
She lays it all out. She tells him she is the real Eden Fox, that her husband is gaslighting her, that the woman at the gallery is a complete fake.
She expects him to do his job, to investigate. But instead, Carter just sighs, opens his laptop, and pulls out the ultimate weapon of the modern era.
He pulls up an Instagram account called Eden Fox Artist.
This moment requires deep analysis, I think, because it exposes the terrifying vulnerability of our digital infrastructure.
Yeah, Carter shows Eden this profile, and it is meticulously populated. There are hundreds of photos.
There are pictures of Edie's paintings. There are before and after shots of the renovations at Spyglass.
There is even a picture of Eden from the back wearing overalls, painting the kitchen walls.
And crucially, the imposter and Harrison are prominently featured. There was a picture of them together at the local pub, smiling, looking like the absolute perfect happy couple.
This is where we confront the concept of the digital twin, right?
Yes. In modern society, our physical existence is constantly validated by our digital shadow.
That's so true.
If the algorithm, the photographic evidence, and the timestamps create a cohesive narrative, human beings are actually wired to trust the screen over the screaming person standing right in front of them.
So the imposter didn't just steal the house, she cultivated a retroactive digital alibi.
She built an impenetrable digital fortress around the fake identity.
But wait, how does a fake Instagram account trump physical reality? I mean, can't Eden just say, that's a fake account, check my fingerprints?
Well, she could say that, but you have to understand the path of least resistance in bureaucratic systems.
Right.
Carter is a local cop in a low-crime village on a Friday night. He is not going to initiate a complex forensic fingerprint analysis when he has a clean, simple, digitally validated answer right there on his laptop.
Because the convenience of digital proof entirely overrides the complexity of physical investigation.
Furthermore, Carter points out that it's not just the internet validating the imposter, it's the physical community too.
Yeah, the gallery owner confirmed the imposter is Eden. The girls at the local bakery confirmed it.
Because the imposter had been going around town for weeks while the real Eden was isolated at the house.
Oh my God, yes. The imposter was planting the seeds, introducing herself, establishing the narrative before the trap was ever even sprung.
Exactly. It is practically a Sybil attack applied to human life.
A Sybil attack? What's that?
In computer science, a Sybil attack is when an attacker subverts the reputation system of a network by creating a large number of pseudonymous identities and uses them to gain a disproportionately large influence.
Oh, wow.
The imposter used social media and casual community interactions to create this massive web of proof that she is Eden. So when the real Eden shows up, the network, which is represented by Carter, views her as the anomaly. She's the glitch that needs to be deleted.
I really want you to pause and think about your own life right now. If I took your phone and your wallet and I dropped you in a town where absolutely no one knew you, how could you legally prove you are you?
It's almost impossible.
Could your life be stolen simply by someone holding your unlocked phone and controlling your social media? Because if you don't have physical documents and the internet says you are someone else, you are effectively erased.
It is a totally terrifying thought experiment. It strips away the illusion of our permanence.
So Eden is completely cornered by this digital and social consensus, and Carter threatens to drive her to a larger facility in Falmouth and lock her in a holding cell overnight for harassment.
Eden is desperate. She begs to make one phone call.
And Carter allows her to use his personal mobile phone, so she dials the only number she knows by heart, Harrison's.
She's hoping to catch him off guard.
Right. The phone rings, and Harrison answers. But because he sees Carter's caller ID, he assumes it's the police calling with an update. He answers urgently, asking, "Have you found her?"
And that line is crucial. It confirms unequivocally to Eden that Harrison is not being coerced by the imposter.
He is not under some kind of spell or blackmail?
No, he is an active, aggressive participant in this conspiracy. He is hunting her.
So when Eden speaks into the phone, Carter realizes she is calling the man she is accused of stalking. He snatches the phone back, apologizes profusely to Harrison, and that's the end of it.
Eden realizes there is no talking her way out of this. She's going to a jail cell.
So she completely changes tactics. She feigns tears. She breaks down, sobbing into her hands. And when Carter leaves the interrogation room for just a few seconds to get her a tissue,
Eden grabs his car keys right off the desk.
she runs out the door into the freezing rain, throws the police keys into the dark water of the harbor so he can't pursue her, and she bolts back up the steep cliff towards Spyglass.
Her transformation in just a few hours is astonishing, honestly. The fight-or-flight response has completely overridden her social compliance.
But as she runs back up into the darkness, the narrative yanks us back again. We return to the past, to Birdie's timeline, 6 months earlier.
Birdie, having just received this bizarre inheritance hours after her terminal diagnosis, decides she just has to see it.
She leaves London, leaves her beloved dog Sunday with the booksellers downstairs, and takes a long train ride down to Cornwall.
And as she arrives in the village of Hope Falls, the text reveals a massive, hidden piece of her backstory.
She looks around the village and realizes this is the exact place where her mother abandoned her before placing her in foster care at the age of 10.
Which completely recontextualizes the nature of her inheritance. This is just a random geographical windfall from some unknown relative.
It is a literal summons from the ghosts of her past.
Yes, she is returning to the exact site of her original developmental trauma. In attachment theory, the sudden abandonment by a primary caregiver at a crucial developmental stage severely disrupts a child's ability to form secure relationships later in life.
So that abandonment is the very reason Birdie flicks off her feelings.
Exactly. She built her entire identity around the narrative that she was completely unwanted.
She takes a taxi up the steep hill and arrives at Spyglass, and the description of the house through Birdie's eyes is incredibly evocative.
She notes the oversized eye-shaped windows and the wonky curved white walls built directly into the cliffs.
It looks like the house is physically watching the town below.
The architecture of Spyglass is deeply symbolic. It resembles a panopticon, which is a structural design where the inmates of an institution are constantly observed by a central watchtower.
Spyglass literally and metaphorically watches over Hope Falls.
And the solicitor had warned Birdie that the house is bound by ancient, bizarre legal covenants.
One of them explicitly states, "No merriment making is to be had within these walls."
That is just such a creepy, specific rule for a deed to a house.
It's so weird. What does that even mean?
It suggests a place steeped in old secrets, puritanical control mechanisms, and generational trauma. There's a concept called architectural determinism, which suggests that the built environment shapes human behavior.
So Spyglass is a house specifically designed to contain things, to suppress emotion, not to celebrate life.
Exactly. And Birdie uses the heavy iron key the solicitor gave her and steps inside.
Immediately, she is hit by a sensory overload. The smell of the house, a distinct mix of old books, wet dogs, and a specific brand of carpet freshener shaken back triggers these deeply repressed childhood memories.
She realizes instantly, I have been in this house before.
Again, we see the absolute power of the olfactory bulb.
Smell bypasses the thalamus and goes directly to the brain's memory and emotion centers. The scent of the house acts as a skeleton key, unlocking memories Birdie's conscious mind had walled off decades ago.
She moves through the dark, silent house and finds her way into what is described as the Blue Room. It has a navy ceiling painted with intricate gold stars.
And the discovery she makes in this room absolutely shatter her.
First, she finds a massive, heavy ruby ring sitting on a dresser. She assumes it's cheap costume jewelry, but when she slips it on, it fits her finger perfectly.
Then she notices the walls. They are entirely covered in framed photographs of Siberian Huskies dogs that look exactly like her beloved Sunday, dating back decades.
The visual echoes are startling.
Her subconscious affinity for Huskies wasn't random at all. It was a dormant connection to her biological lineage.
But the emotional gut punch is the photograph sitting prominently on the mantelpiece.
It's a picture of Birdie, at age 5, sitting happily on the lap of a gray-haired woman she assumes is the grandmother she supposedly never knew.
And right next to that photo is a thick stack of envelopes tied tightly with string. Unread birthday and Christmas cards spanning 30 years.
Birdie unties the string and opens one. The handwriting reads, "To dearest Olivia, my favorite little birdie, why won't you fly home?"
And inside each card is a single, perfectly preserved swallow's feather.
A feather that perfectly matches the tattoo Birdie has etched into her own hand.
You really have to consider the psychological devastation of this discovery. It absolutely shatters Birdie's foundational narrative.
She has spent 30 years living a hard, dangerous life, believing she was completely unwanted, abandoned to the foster system like trash.
But these letters prove she was loved. She was searched for. She was desired by her family. but somehow she was kept away.
Finding out you were loved after a lifetime of believing you were abandoned doesn't bring relief. It causes a complete structural collapse of your coping mechanisms. The trauma wasn't natural, it was manufactured.
It's utterly heartbreaking. She's standing there, realizing her entire emotional armor was built on a massive lie, while her body is simultaneously dying of cancer.
But amid all this emotional wreckage, Bertie finds something else among a pile of junk mail near the front door.
It's a luxurious black envelope with rose gold lettering, and it's from a company called Thanatos.
Thanatos, of course, being the Greek personification of death.
Bertie opens the black envelope, and the premise of the letter inside is absolutely chilling. It asks a very direct question. If you could know your death day, would you want to?
The letter claims that this company, Thanatos, has discovered a scientific, algorithmic way to predict a person's exact date of death based on medical data and predictive modeling.
They say there are no fees, no waiting lists. They offer to let you know exactly how much time you have left.
And the letter is addressed directly to Olivia Bird.
We really have to contextualize the terror of this moment. Bertie was given a terminal cancer diagnosis literally days ago in London.
She has told absolutely no one. Her dog is the only creature she interacted with before getting on the train to Cornwall.
So the question is, who knew she was coming to Spyglass?
And more terrifyingly, who knows she is sick?
Exactly. A dying woman who desperately wants to know how much time she has left magically receives a letter offering her exact expiration date the moment she steps into a haunted house.
It's not just a coincidence. It is profound, weaponized surveillance.
If a data company sent you a letter right now saying they knew exactly when your biology would fail, the paranoia would consume you. It's surveillance capitalism applied to human mortality.
Thanatos preys on the ultimate psychological vulnerability, our mortality salience. In psychology, terror management theory suggests that most human behavior is driven by our underlying fear of death.
So when a person is confronted with their own mortality, they seek certainty.
Thanatos offers an illusion of control, the exact date, in a situation where Bertie has absolutely zero control. But the timing of the letter creates an immediate atmosphere of intense dread.
Bertie is isolated in a house that watches the town, reading a letter from an entity that is clearly watching her.
And right on cue, as she is holding this macabre letter in the silent, creepy house, there is a loud, authoritative knock at the front door.
Bertie, being the hardened criminal that she is, doesn't cower. She marches down the hall, unlocks the heavy door, and opens it.
And standing there is a young, arrogant police officer.
It is Sergeant Carter. But remember, this is 6 months before he meets Eden in the bushes.
Carter looks completely surprised to see a woman standing there. He says it's his night off, but he was down in the village, looked up at the cliff, saw the lights on at Spyglass, and knew the house was supposed to be empty since the old woman died.
He demands to know what she's doing there. Bertie, totally unintimidated by a rural cop, stands her ground and introduces herself. She says, "I'm Olivia Bird. I inherited this house."
And Carter frowns. He looks at her, completely serious, and delivers the line that ends this section. Olivia Bird is dead.
It's a massive, jarring cliffhanger. Why is Carter so certain? Who told the local police that the heir to the estate was dead?
It really reinforces the overarching theme of bureaucratic identity erasure. Both Eden and Bertie are being told by the authorities, specifically by Sergeant Carter, that their understanding of their own existence is factually incorrect.
Carter acts as the gatekeeper of reality in both timelines. He tells Eden she is not Eden Fox, and he tells Olivia Bird that she is a ghost.
Which brings us crashing back to the present night, the collision of these two timelines.
We snap back to October 30th. It is still pouring rain. A soaked, terrified, exhausted Eden has just run all the way up the cliff from the police station.
She arrives back at Spyglass. She sees that Harrison's Porsche is still gone, meaning they are likely still down at the gallery, drinking wine and celebrating her stolen life.
Eden has reached a total psychological breaking point. She realizes that reasoning with the world has completely failed.
The digital footprint has defeated her physical truth. The algorithm beat the human.
She realizes the only way to prove her identity, to fight back against the Instagram account and Harrison's lies, is to obtain hard, state-issued evidence. She needs her physical passport.
And she knows it is locked inside that house.
She walks around to the back of the property, hidden from the road. She picks up a heavy, jagged rock from the landscaping, and she smashes the glass of her own back door.
She reaches her arm through the jagged shards, cuts herself, unlocks the deadbolt from the inside, and breaks into her own home.
The physical act of smashing the glass is deeply symbolic.
It really represents the shattering of the social contract. Eden has been stripped of the luxury of compliance. When the law and society reject your existence, you are forced to operate outside of them.
Think about the incredible character arc we've witnessed in just a few hours. When the sun was setting, Eden was a painfully shy, isolated wife who was afraid of making small talk at a cocktail party.
Now, she has been pushed so far out of her reality that she is a fugitive.
She has stolen police property, thrown keys into the ocean, and she is literally committing burglary against her own house.
But as she stands there in the dark kitchen, dripping wet, bleeding slightly, surrounded by the broken glass of her own reality, the narrative delivers one final, brutal, emotional blow.
She looks at the expensive kitchen counter, and she is violently haunted by the memory of christening that exact counter with Harrison on their first night in the house.
It was just a few weeks ago.
They drank champagne, they laughed, they made love, they celebrated their forever home. It is a brutal juxtaposition of her past love and her present terror.
She is standing over the ghost of her marriage in a house that doesn't recognize her, hiding from a husband who is actively erasing her.
If we look at the architecture of the narrative the author has built, we see that Spyglass is functioning as a vault.
It holds the historical secrets of a dying criminal, Birdie, who discovered her life was a manufactured lie.
And it holds the stolen present of an isolated artist, Eden, who is discovering her marriage is a weapon.
The connective tissue here is Spyglass itself, the terrifying concept of stolen time, and the recurring presence of Sergeant Carter, who serves as the bureaucratic executioner in both eras.
We spend our lives building physical and digital fortresses around our identities. We buy homes with heavy deadbolts. We cultivate social media profiles with hundreds of validating photographs. We legally bind ourselves in marriages.
We do this to feel permanent, to feel safe from the chaos of the world.
But what if those fortresses aren't actually protecting you? What if they are perfectly designed cages, just waiting for someone else to walk in, change the locks, and take the key? Think about what truly makes you you. If everything you own, everyone you know, and everything the internet says about you was suddenly inverted, how would you convince the world of your own existence? Picture this. You've just rushed back from a long, exhausting run.
Right, you're just completely wiped out.
Yeah. Your heart is pounding against your ribs, you're trying to catch your breath, and you step through the front door of the home you lovingly, painstakingly renovated.
Your sanctuary.
Exactly. You know the exact creak of every floorboard, right? You know the specific faint smell of the expensive paint you picked out yourself. Like you tested a dozen swatches for this place.
Oh, I know that feeling.
But as you walk through the rooms, wiping the sweat off your forehead, this cold dread starts to pool in your stomach. Because every single trace of your existence has been meticulously wiped out.
Completely erased.
Yes, your passport, gone. Your laptop, vanished. The coats, the mail, all that random clutter that proves a human being actually occupies a space, it is completely erased.
It's just wild. I mean, it represents the absolute ultimate violation of sanctuary. When we think about psychological warfare, right, the destruction of the home space is paramount.
It really is.
A home isn't just shelter. It basically functions as an external hard drive for your identity.
Yeah.
You offload your memories into the objects around you.
Right. The photos, the book.
Exactly. So when that environment is suddenly just a blank slate and it actively denies you ever lived there, it induces this state of profound cognitive dissonance. Your brain literally cannot reconcile your spatial memory with the visual evidence right in front of you.
And we are jumping straight into the visceral, suffocating panic of Eden Fox experiencing exactly this in our deep dive today. She is frantic.
Daily frantic.
She is tearing through the downstairs of Spyglass, which is this beautiful, incredibly quirky house with the distinctive eye-shaped windows overlooking this coastal village called Hope Falls.
Such a creepy detail, those windows. And she's dripping wet in her running gear, desperately looking for anything, just anything to prove she exists.
Yeah.
But there is nothing.
And here is a deeply unsettling physical detail that I just cannot stop thinking about. When she goes to change out of her wet running clothes, she pulls on a pair of her everyday jeans, and they suddenly feel completely loose around her waist.
Oh, wow.
They're practically falling off her.
Which is such a terrifying biological indicator. I mean, the loose jeans hint at sudden, extreme weight loss. In this kind of context, it implies one of two things, and honestly, both are horrifying.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, either she has endured a prolonged period of intense cortisol-flooded anxiety that literally caused her body to consume its own mass, or, and this is far more terrifying, she's experiencing missing time.
Like dissociative amnesia.
Exactly.
Right.
Her body is telling a physical story of starvation or stress that her conscious mind just cannot currently access. The trauma is literally written on her waistline, even if her brain is actively blocking the memory of how it got there.
See, I'm trying to put myself in her shoes. If my jeans suddenly didn't fit, my first thought wouldn't be, I'm an imposter. I didn't think I had a terrible illness, or my mind was just playing tricks on me.
Right? You doubt yourself.
Yeah, and whoever is doing this to her is totally banking on that self-doubt. Because right after the jeans, she grabs a sweater just to warm up. It's this really pretty, expensive-feeling pale gray cashmere sweater covered in stars.
But she doesn't recognize it.
Not at all. Not even a vague recollection. It's like a prop master is sneaking onto the set design of her life and just swapping out the wardrobe.
And that is a classic mechanism of coercive control. By replacing her personal chosen items with things she fundamentally does not recognize, the architect of this gaslighting isn't just stealing her belongings.
They're doing something way worse.
Exactly. They are actively overwriting her reality. They are providing her with a new script and a new costume, and they are daring her to accept it. If she puts on that star sweater, she is capitulating to the false narrative.
She's wearing the physical proof of her own erasure. I do have to push back on that a little bit, though. I mean, she's freezing. She's dripping wet from a run. Isn't she just putting it on for survival? Like, if I'm freezing in my own home, I'm grabbing whatever's right in front of me. Does putting on the sweater really mean she's accepting the gaslighting, or is she just cold?
It's both, and that is exactly why it's so insidious. The survival instinct overrides the cognitive rebellion.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. The abuser forces her into a position where she must interact with the fabricated reality just to meet her basic physiological needs. That's how deep the manipulation goes.
Yeah.
You are forced to wear the lie just to stay warm.
Okay, that makes it so much worse. Because the psychological horror truly peaks a moment later in the bedroom.
Oh, the photo frame.
Yes. Eden is rummaging through drawers, throwing unfamiliar objects onto the carpet, trying not to completely lose her mind, and she spots a heavy silver photo frame sitting on the dresser.
A very specific frame.
Very specific. She explicitly remembers choosing this exact frame years ago to hold her favorite wedding photo. She remembers placing it right there. But when she looks at the photo inside it now, her husband, Harrison, is standing there in his tuxedo, but the bride smiling next to him isn't her.
It's another woman.
It's another woman.
The sheer violence of that specific image is staggering. If you think about the mechanics of memory, right? A wedding photo is a foundational anchor of an adult relationship. It's tangible proof of a public commitment.
Right, it's supposed to be permanent.
Exactly. It's one thing for an intruder to steal a person's photo entirely. It's another thing entirely to seamlessly insert an imposter into their most intimate foundational memory. It totally severs her connection to her own past.
Because it suggests she was never married to him at all.
Exactly. It suggests that not only is she not in her house today, but she was never part of that life.
It's literally like finding out your entire life was deep-faked. And Eden, who explicitly tells us she is not a violent or explosive person, she just completely snaps.
I don't blame her.
Right. She grabs the silver frame and just launches it across the room. It hits the wall. The glass shatters into 1,000 pieces all over the floorboards. It's this incredibly cinematic, visceral moment of her reality physically breaking apart.
And in the debris, she finds the clue.
Yes, the only thing of hers that seems to have been left behind by mistake or maybe left on purpose, it's an old birthday card from Harrison. And scrawled inside, in his handwriting, are the words, "I love you to death."
We really need to analyze the linguistic framing there because, I love you to death is usually a harmless, slightly hyperbolic cliche we say to kids, to pets, to partners.
Yeah, I say it all the time.
But context dictates meaning, right? In an environment where your life has been systematically erased, where an imposter bride is sitting in your silver frame, that phrase instantly transforms.
It becomes a literal threat.
A horrific, literal threat. It goes from a declaration of lifelong commitment to a death sentence. It warps the allegedly safe space of her marriage into a scene of impending doom. The subtext becomes, your husband is not your safe harbor. He is the architect of your execution.
So just picture her standing there. She's terrified, clutching this incredibly creepy card, stepping over shattered glass, and then the auditory terror kicks in.
The footsteps.
She hears a noise, the distinct crunch of footsteps coming up the gravel drive outside. So she creeps out onto the landing to peer out of those strange, eye-shaped windows of spyglass. She doesn't see anyone, but her paranoia is just absolute.
She's in full fight or flight.
Exactly. She manages to find a spare set of car keys for her electric Range Rover, and her instinct finally chooses flight. She decides she needs to run, but as she's heading toward the top of the stone staircase, she hears a floorboard creak directly behind her.
The manipulation of spatial tension there is just masterful. She believes the threat is outside on the gravel, but the true threat has already breached the perimeter.
Yes. She spins around, loses her balance, or maybe she was violently shoved. It happens in such a blinding flash she legitimately doesn't know. And she tumbles backward. She falls down the steep stone staircase,
Oh, no.
twisting, breaking, landing with an explosive, sickening crack to the back of her head against the floor. Her world fades to black. And her very last conscious thought before the darkness takes over is that she might be dying.
And when she wakes up,
When she finally wakes up, she is dazed, nauseous, in agonizing pain. And there's a face leaning over her. It's Sergeant Carter, the young local police officer. And here is where the institutional nightmare really begins.
oh, this part is so frustrating.
It is. Carter doesn't ask if she's the homeowner. He doesn't ask if she fell. He looks at her bleeding on her own floor, and he assumes she is the burglar who smashed the back door to get in.
And this interaction introduces a really crucial concept, which is systemic authority over reality. Carter's standing in her house, dressed in the uniform of state authority, looking at her bleeding on the floor, and he completely dismisses her truth.
He gaslights her.
He does, but not with malice, rather with bureaucratic presumption.
Even when Eden physically shows him her house keys, pointing to the keychain that literally has her name, Eden, engraved on it, he mocks her.
Right, he suggests she just stole the keys from the kitchen counter.
Exactly.
I want to talk about how infuriating that is. It's like a nightmare where you are screaming your own name at the top of your lungs, but nobody speaks your language.
It's the ultimate feeling of powerlessness.
Every piece of proof you offer is immediately turned against you as evidence of your guilt or your insanity. You're trapped in this paradox where the harder you try to prove you are real, the crazier and more desperate you look to the person in power.
That's a great way to put it.
And Eden realizes, lying there bleeding on the cold stone floor, that this arrogant man-child cop is not going to save her. In fact, he's going to arrest her and lock her away, completely finishing her erasure.
So she has to save herself. She does. She spots some clean towels in the adjacent room, tricks him into going upstairs to get them, which, by the way, subtly proves she knows the layout of the house better than he does.
Good point.
Right. And the moment his back is turned, she scrambles up, bolts out the door, and throws herself into her electric Range Rover.
It's a brilliant, desperate survival instinct. She uses her intimate spatial knowledge of her own erased home as a weapon to facilitate her escape. But, this hostile, deeply aggressive interaction with Sergeant Carter is actually incredibly telling.
Because it wasn't always like this.
Exactly. Especially when we contrast it with a completely different encounter he had at that exact same house, in that exact same room 6 months earlier.
Right. Let's jump back, because Carter isn't always this aggressive enforcer of reality. If we move from Eden's current gaslighting to what happened in the past, we see a completely different side of authority. Let's look at a woman named Birdie.
Olivia Byrne.
Yes, Olivia Bird. So 6 months prior, Birdie has just inherited this house, Spyglass, from her grandmother. And this Sergeant Carter, who knocks on her door to do a routine wellness check, is a completely different human being.
9 day.
He's not the cocky, hostile cop who just stood over Eden. He's this sheepish, slightly nervous, very junior, and very handsome young officer who looks like he's totally out of his depth.
The contrast in how authority operates based on the perception of class and ownership is stark here. With Eden, Carter perceived a frantic, disheveled intruder, so he became the enforcer.
He used his power.
Right. But with Birdie, he perceives a calm, articulate, legitimate homeowner, so he reverts to a naive, almost childlike deference. He is desperate to project authority, to seem like a real cop, but Birdie sees right through it.
Because she's highly intelligent and deeply cynical.
Exactly. She actually asks to see his ID badge, she toys with his fragile male ego, and she effortlessly seizes total psychological control of the interaction immediately.
Wait, I'm struggling with Carter's character a bit here, though. How does a trained police officer swing so wildly from terrified rookie to aggressive tyrant? Is he just incredibly bad at his job, or is there some psychological defense mechanism at play in how he views his village?
It's absolutely a psychological defense mechanism, specifically related to cognitive framing. Carter is a product of his hyper-curated environment.
Oh,
He firmly believes that Hope Falls is statistically one of the safest places in England.
He literally claims that murders never happen there.
Right. He lives a perfectly sanitized, PG-13 existence. He watches the horrific news on TV and believes the rest of the world is a chaotic disaster. But his village is a magical immune bubble.
So when something breaks the bubble, he panics.
Exactly. When something contradicts that bubble like an intruder, he lashes out aggressively to crush the anomaly. When things are quiet, like a wellness check, he relaxes into his default naivete. This willful blindness prevents him from recognizing actual complex malice.
And his naivete is on full display when Bertie asks him about her grandmother, the original Olivia Bird. Carter says she was just a local recluse, lived with dogs, kept to herself, standard small-town eccentric stuff.
But then he drops the folklore.
Yes, he casually drops this massive, terrifying piece of local folklore, the legend of the woman who died twice.
And this is where the macabre history of the house begins to bleed into the present narrative.
Hmm.
Carter tells Bertie this incredible, gruesome story from 1944. 18-year-old Olivia, Bertie's grandmother, receives a telegram stating that her fiancé was killed in action during the war.
And she just drops dead.
Upon reading it, she drops dead on the spot. She literally dies of a broken heart, a catastrophic stress-induced cardiac event.
So her wealthy family is devastated, right? They buy the most expensive, luxurious, silk-lined coffin available, dress her in her finest clothes, and bury her with a massive, priceless ruby engagement ring on her finger.
Which is a huge mistake.
It's a total spectacle of grief and wealth. And of course, in a poor wartime village that attracts grave robbers. The very same night she is buried, two local men dig her up under the cover of darkness. They pry open the coffin, rip off her expensive earrings, snap the gold necklace from her throat.
But the ring is stuck.
The ring is stuck, the knuckle is swollen, so one of the men pulls out a rusty fishing knife and simply starts to slice off her finger to get the ruby ring.
We have to pause here and consider the absolute visceral horror of taphophobia, the fear of being buried alive. Because the excruciating pain of the knife slicing through bone and cartilage acts as a brutal jolt of adrenaline.
It wakes her up.
The pain wakes her up. She opens her eyes, lying in a coffin at the bottom of an open grave, staring at two men mutilating her hand, and she screams. A blood-curdling, unearthly scream.
The grave robbers are so consumed by primal terror, believing they are being attacked by a vengeful demon, that they flee blindly into the night and actually jump off the nearby coastal cliff into the sea.
It's such a gothic image.
It really is. And the next morning, the village wakes up, and Olivia is found fast asleep in her own bed at Spyglass. She's covered head to toe in grave mud and dried blood. She is completely missing her marriage finger, but she is alive.
And the detail that locks in the dread.
Oh, she had locked all the heavy wooden doors of Spyglass from the inside. How an 18-year-old girl climbed out of a muddy 6-foot grave, walked miles back to her house bleeding out, and locked herself away remains this terrifying, unsolved mystery to the village.
It solidifies Spyglass not just as a building, but as a monument to trauma and survival. Olivia lived to be almost 100 years old, wearing her remaining rings on her other fingers for the rest of her life, living as a total recluse with her dogs, forever missing that marriage finger.
The house absorbed her isolation.
It did. But Carter reveals something even more chilling to Bertie about her grandmother's second death, the one that literally just happened.
Because she didn't just pass away quietly in her sleep as a surprise.
No, she didn't. 3 days before she died, this elderly, entirely housebound woman forced herself to walk to the village postbox and mailed a letter directly to the police station, addressed personally to Sergeant Carter.
And in the letter, she predicted the exact specific day she was going to die. She sent her live-in carer away on paid leave, stated clearly that she wanted to die alone with dignity, and told Carter she would leave the back door of Spyglass unlocked so he could easily find her body without breaking a window.
That is just incredible planning.
Right. And sure enough, on the exact day she predicted in ink, Carter walks into the library and finds her dead in her armchair, peacefully reading a copy of Frankenstein.
The irony of her reading Frankenstein, a book about reanimating the dead while waiting for her second final death, is a brilliant thematic touch.
It's so poetic.
The coroner rules it entirely natural causes. Old age, no foul play, no toxins in the blood, absolutely not a suicide. It's medically impossible to pinpoint the exact day your heart will simply stop from old age. But Carter doesn't question it deeply.
Because questioning it would pop his safe bubble.
Exactly. He accepts it because it's easier.
See, if you tell me someone predicted the exact Tuesday they would die of natural causes, I'm calling a forensic team. It defies all biology and logic. And Bertie, listening to this story from Carter, immediately calls bullshit.
She's a cynical Londoner.
Yeah, she knows people don't just schedule their natural demise. But surprisingly, she doesn't kick Carter out for being an idiot. In fact, his sheer, unthreatening naivete is exactly why Bertie finds him slightly charming.
She invites him in.
She actually invites this young cop inside, and they end up having this incredibly passionate, intense, seemingly out-of-nowhere hookup on a blue velvet sofa in the grand lounge of Spyglass, right beneath this beautifully painted dark blue ceiling covered in golden stars.
That ceiling painted with stars is a vital recurring motif, especially when we remember the unfamiliar star-covered sweater Eden is forced to wear later on.
Oh, that's a great connection.
The house itself acts as the silent witness, its architecture holding memories and secrets. But we also have to deeply analyze Bertie's psychological state in this precise moment.
Why does she do it?
Why does a cynical, highly educated, intensely private woman from London suddenly sleep with a naive, young village cop on the sofa of her dead grandmother's house?
We find out exactly why, and it's heartbreaking. Because Bertie is dying.
She has a terminal diagnosis.
Yes, we learn through her internal monologue that she has recently received a terminal medical diagnosis. She's keeping it a fiercely guarded secret from everyone, her colleagues, her friends, but it is the invisible engine driving all of her current behavior.
She's running out of time.
Exactly. She makes this incredibly poignant observation. She notes that when you get a terminal diagnosis in your 30s, you stop collecting firsts and you immediately start collecting lasts.
The last time you see the ocean.
The last time you eat a certain meal. This hookup with Carter isn't just about physical attraction, it's a desperate, clawing attempt to feel physically alive, to grab onto a moment of spontaneous, raw pleasure before her biological clock runs out.
Psychologically, it's a fierce, defiant reclamation of her own body. According to terror management theory, when humans are confronted with their own mortality, they often engage in intense, life-affirming behaviors to assert control.
That makes total sense.
Bertie's body is fundamentally betraying her at a cellular level with this illness, so she uses that same body to experience overwhelming sensation. And during this intense vulnerability, Carter notices something.
Her tattoos.
Specifically, a small outline of a swallow tattooed on her hand. Bertie internally reveals to us, though, not to Carter, the horrifying origin of that ink.
She got it at 13.
Right, she got that swallow tattoo at 13 years old, specifically to cover up a circular cigarette burn. A burn her incredibly abusive foster mother gave her as a twisted Christmas present.
That is so dark.
The woman literally pinned an 8-year-old Bertie's hand down on a table and ground a lit cigarette into her skin, smiling while the child screamed and cried.
The juxtaposition of that memory against the intimate moment with Carter is so jarring. Bertie's internal justification for the tattoo is profound, though. She says, something ugly can sometimes be turned into something beautiful.
She is a master architect at compartmentalizing severe trauma and repainting it into survival.
But their post-coital intimacy gets abruptly shattered. Bertie's old-school, analog, non-smartphone starts ringing loudly.
A flip phone, basically.
Yeah. Carter, being a millennial, is visibly shocked she doesn't have a modern smartphone. He asks how she functions, and she explains very coldly that she values her absolute privacy. She states as a matter of fact that tech companies are constantly listening through microphones, tracking location data, mapping social networks.
She refuses to be surveilled.
She vehemently refuses to be tracked by an algorithm, and the mood is completely ruined, so she basically kicks him out of the house.
She reasserts total spatial and emotional control over her environment the second she feels exposed.
But the true exposition happens after Carter leaves. Bertie is alone, sorting through her dead grandmother's massive pile of old mail, and she finds something that stops her cold.
The black envelope.
It's a heavy, premium black envelope with striking gold foil lettering. Inside is a formal letter from a company called Thanatos, and the letter politely thanks Olivia Bird for joining the Thanatos family and clinically confirms her exact date of death, Friday, February 14th, 2025.
Just let that sink in. 2 full weeks before her grandmother actually died peacefully in her chair, This corporation predicted the exact day she would expire.
It wasn't a supernatural premonition.
No, it wasn't magic. It was a cold, hard corporate calculation delivered via the Postal Service. And that realization completely shatters Birdie's reality. The universe isn't random anymore, it's algorithmic.
But the story forces us to leave Birdie staring in horror at this impossible letter for a moment and violently jump back to the present day to Eden fleeing in her electric Range Rover, because Eden is also desperately searching for proof of a reality that has just been shattered.
The transition from the claustrophobia of Eden's erased house to the terrifying, expansive, blinding darkness of the moors is a brilliant manipulation of psychological space.
It's totally disorienting.
Eden is completely untethered. No home, no identity, no safe harbor. And as she drives blindly through the pitch-black, narrow, winding labyrinth of Blackmore National Park, the silence allows her mind to inevitably loop back to the trauma that fractured her life in the first place.
This is where we truly begin to understand the complex, crushing architecture of Eden's internal guilt.
Yes.
She starts reflecting on her failing marriage to Harrison, and she introduces this chilling, deeply cynical philosophy to you. She says, all varieties of love are an equation, and she literally spells out the math in her head.
Time plus life multiplied by hard times plus heartbreak equals love minus lust.
Okay, if we break down that equation like a mathematical formula, what does it mean?
It reveals a profound, devastating resignation. In economics, we'd call this the sunk cost fallacy applied to human emotion. She has accepted that passion, desire, and joy, the lust component, have been entirely, permanently subtracted from her marriage.
Wow.
What remains is a trauma bond, built strictly on elapsed time, shared logistical life, and immense crushing heartbreak. She's actively convincing herself that this highly transactional, exhausted, passionless form of love is mathematically enough.
Because leaving is too scary.
Because the alternative, admitting her marriage is completely dead and leaving, requires an emotional bankruptcy she's too terrified to file for.
That is such a brilliant way to phrase it. She's treating her marriage like a bad stock portfolio she refuses to sell. And the heartbreak variable in her equation, she's talking about a specific catastrophic afternoon 10 years ago.
The memory is so painful.
She details the memory with this excruciating frame-by-frame precision. Her daughter, Gabriella, was 8 years old. It was raining. Gabriella wanted to stay inside and play hide-and-seek, but Eden, as the mother, said no.
She sent her outside.
She zipped Gabriella into a heavy coat, pulled on a pink bobble hat and matching pink mittens she had knitted herself, and explicitly told her to go play outside in the driveway. Why? Because Eden wanted the house empty to seduce her husband.
The narrative here deliberately thrusts the listener into a deeply uncomfortable moral space. It does not shy away from the raw, often unmentioned truth of adult sexual desire violently intersecting with parental responsibility.
It's very real.
Eden describes the mechanics of the seduction vividly, dropping her clothes piece by piece on the stairs, waiting for Harrison in the master bedroom. It's a moment of intense connection and lust between a married couple.
The very thing she claims is now missing.
Exactly. But the crucial context is that it's a stolen quickie in the middle of a miserable, rainy afternoon while their child is pushed outside.
It's an ordinary, slightly selfish parental moment that happens a million times a day without consequence. But here, the consequence is absolute destruction.
Harrison leaves right after.
He goes back to work. Eden rests in bed for a bit, basking in the afterglow. And when she finally gets up and looks out the window, expecting to see Gabriella playing, the driveway is empty.
Gabrielle is gone.
The maternal panic sets in instantly. She tears through the house, calls Harrison. He immediately calls the police. And then the sensory details of how Eden recalls this trauma are just devastating.
The rain.
Eden is staring out the front window, and she describes the rain as being so heavy, so torrential, it looked like it was falling up as well as down, bouncing violently off the concrete. And through that distorted wall of water, she hears it.
The siren.
The screaming Doppler effect wail of a police siren approaching too fast.
The auditory build-up to the trauma is masterful. Our brains encode traumatic memories differently than mundane ones. They lock onto specific sensory inputs. The heavy, unnatural rain, the approaching frantic siren.
The brakes screeching.
The sudden, violent screeching of brakes. And then the visual horror snaps into focus. Eden sees the police cruiser stopped at a strange, violent angle on the residential street. The blue emergency lights are strobing, reflecting harshly on the black, wet tarmac.
And beneath the tires.
Beneath the heavy front tires of the police car is a flattened, twisted shape of violently crushed metal. It's Gabriella's brand new bicycle.
Eden runs out of the house, sprinting blindly into the torrential rain, slipping on the wet road. And the very first thing she recognizes on the asphalt isn't her daughter's face. It's the color pink.
The mittens.
Those pink knitted mittens soaking up the water. Gabriella is lying broken, unconscious, and bleeding on the road. The police cruiser, which was rushing at top speed to respond to the missing child call, was driving recklessly fast through the residential area in near-zero visibility heavy rain, and it struck her head-on.
This specific event is the absolute crux of Eden's psychological burden. The official police investigation blamed the driver of the cruiser. They determined he was speeding in a blind spot during a severe weather event. The state took the blame.
But Eden blames herself.
Eden's internal architecture has absorbed 100% of the guilt. Her logic is punitive, circular, and absolute.
How does she rationalize it?
She thinks if she hadn't wanted a selfish, quick sexual hookup with her husband, she wouldn't have locked her daughter outside in the rain, she wouldn't have gone missing, the police wouldn't have been called, and the car wouldn't have hit her.
She draws a direct line.
A direct, unshakable causal line from her own sexual desire to the physical destruction of her child.
I can't even fathom carrying that weight. And it isolates her entirely. Harrison's love for his daughter instantly eclipsed his love for Eden after that day. He looked at her differently. They were never the same.
The lust was permanently subtracted.
Exactly. Gabriella survived the physical impact, but after multiple excruciating surgeries, her young mind never fully healed from the trauma. She developed extreme post-traumatic mutism. She hasn't spoken a single solitary word in 10 years.
It's tragic.
And now, in the present, Eden is driving through the night, arriving at this remote facility called the Manor, desperate for this silent, strange daughter to somehow validate her identity. She needs the girl she broke to prove she exists.
And the manor itself is a fascinating sociological construct. It is described not as a clinical hospital, but as a spooky, sprawling old mansion that has been retrofitted by a wealthy corporate entity into a highly secure, extremely discreet mental health facility.
Specifically designed for rich, broken people.
It's where wealth goes to hide its failures. When Eden finally arrives in the dead of night, the atmosphere is deeply, intentionally unsettling. She is buzzed in through heavy security gates, and she's greeted in the lobby by a night nurse she internally dubs the woman in white.
And this nurse is wearing an entirely white uniform, a crisp white headband, thick white glasses, and white rubber-soled shoes that squeak sharply on the floorboards.
The auditory details here make my skin crawl.
It's the squeaking of those bright white leather shoes echoing down the long, empty parquet hallway, overlapping with the heavy, rhythmic tick-tock of a massive antique grandfather clock near the entrance.
Doesn't sound like a hospital.
It feels significantly less like a place of healing and much more like an extraordinarily expensive velvet-lined prison. The nurse actually has to pull out a heavy, jangling set of metal keys to unlock the door to Gabriella's room from the outside.
And Eden realizes the danger.
Eden watches this and is suddenly horrified, a new wave of maternal panic hitting her as she wonders what would happen to her daughter in a fire.
That realization sharply amplifies her pre-existing maternal guilt. She recognizes in that moment that she essentially traded the daily exhausting burden of caring for a severely traumatized child for the luxury of paying a corporation to lock her daughter away behind heavy oak doors.
Wow, yeah.
But the true paralyzing shock comes when that heavy door finally swings open.
Eden is entering the room specifically looking for a framed family photo she left on the nightstand 6 months ago. She needs to hold it, to use it as tangible proof of her identity, to assure herself the imposter in the silver frame at home isn't real.
But instead of finding the photo,
she is physically confronted by the walls of Gabriella's room. Okay, so before they moved Gabriella to this facility, her paintings were exactly what you'd expect from a traumatized child trying to express herself without words. Very childlike. Simple animals, gray clouds, heavy rain, a coping mechanism.
but not anymore.
Not anymore. The walls of room 13 are now completely covered, floor to ceiling, in exquisite, terrifyingly perfect, master-level oil and watercolor paintings of spyglass.
The house with the eye-shaped windows.
A house that Gabriella has never seen, never visited, and never been told about.
So we have to stop and ask the fundamental question here. How is this scientifically or psychologically possible? The narrative forces you to consider two equally terrifying explanations.
What's the first one?
The first is almost supernatural. That the profound trauma of the accident somehow unlocked a latent, clairvoyant ability in Gabriella, psychically connecting her to the dark, violent history of the house her mother now occupies.
Like she's tapped in.
Right. The second explanation, and arguably the much more sinister, earthly one, is that someone has been covertly visiting Gabriella.
Oh, God.
Someone's been sitting in this locked room, showing her photographs of spyglass, feeding her detailed visual images, and systematically manipulating a highly traumatized, nonverbal, suggestible teenager into obsessively painting a house she's never been to.
If someone is doing that, it's psychological grooming on a monstrous level. The sheer terror of looking at those paintings completely derails Eden's mind. She's hyperventilating. And then the rustling of the bed sheets. Gabriella wakes up.
The tension here is unbearable.
She looks startled, blinking harshly against the bright hallway light spilling into the room. The woman in white steps forward and says, in this very clinical, patronizing tone, "Gabriella, your mother is here to see you."
And what does Gabriella do?
Gabriella sits up. She looks directly at Eden's face. She slowly shakes her head from side to side. And then this young girl who has not allowed a single syllable to cross her lips in an entire decade opens her mouth.
She finally speaks.
And in a fragile, raspy, broken whisper, she punctuates every single word.
She is not my mother.
It is the ultimate catastrophic gut punch. The rejection is absolute. It is the final nail in the coffin of Eden's identity. But the psychological nuance in this specific moment is absolutely critical to grasp.
Because of the smile.
Yes, because a second later, when the nurse momentarily looks away to check her pager, Gabriella slowly turns her face back toward Eden and gives her a slow, deliberate, incredibly creepy smile.
Oh, it gave me chills.
Now we must ask, is Gabriella a tragic victim of the gaslighting? Does she genuinely believe the imposter woman who has been visiting her is her real mother? Because someone has manipulated her memory like Elizabeth Loftus's false memory experiments.
Or is it revenge? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Or is Gabriella fully consciously aware that the frantic woman standing before her is indeed Eden, and she is deliberately seizing this one moment of power to participate in the psychological torture of the mother she deeply resents for abandoning her?
Oh, it's pure malice in that smile. There is no confusion. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows her mother is hanging by a fraying thread of sanity, and Gabriella just picks up the psychological scissors and snips it.
She wields her silence and her first words as a weapon.
Eden is so completely overwhelmed by the betrayal, and she actually admits to her own sudden, flashing, terrifying hatred for her own daughter in that moment that she literally turns and runs away.
She just bolts.
She bolts out of the suffocating room, sprints past the impossible paintings of the eye-shaped windows, clatters down the spiral staircase, bursts through the heavy front door, and runs blindly into the freezing night air.
The maternal bond, which is supposed to be the most unbreakable anchor of human identity, is completely irreparably shattered. Eden is now utterly alone in the universe. She has no physical proof of her existence, no sanctuary, and she has been explicitly rejected by the only living flesh and blood that could vouch for her reality.
Which perfectly brings us back to the chilling concept of proof. Proof of existence, proof of identity, data, and who actually owns the rights to the timeline of your life, and crucially, your death.
The commodification of death.
Yes, let's transition away from Eden's frantic night and move back to Birdie's timeline 6 months earlier. Because after finding that impossible black and gold letter predicting her grandmother's death down to the exact Friday, Birdie doesn't just sit around Spyglass and marvel at it. She is a woman of action.
She goes to London.
She immediately travels back to London to directly confront this shadowy company, Thanatos.
And the physical, architectural contrast between the two locations is incredibly deliberate and thematic. We leave the ancient, rainy, folklore-drenched, taphophobia-haunted village of Cornwall, and we step directly into a pristine, hyper-futuristic, blindingly white-box clinic situated on the ultra-wealthy Harley Street in London.
It's so clinical.
It is the absolute peak aesthetic of hypermodernity. It is a sterile environment where messy, unpredictable human biology is sanitized, quantified, and processed into clean data points.
Birdie walks through the sliding glass doors, and the receptionist greets her warmly by her full name, "Welcome, Ms. Bird," before Birdie even opens her mouth to speak.
Which is immediately unsettling.
Very. This receptionist is young, dressed in absurdly expensive tailored designer clothes, with a flawless, aggressively airbrushed face and dazzling, perfectly symmetrical white teeth. Birdie actually notes internally that the woman looks eerily familiar, almost like she might be a working actor rather than a medical professional.
An actor playing a part.
Exactly. And the intake process that follows is incredibly intense, invasive, and deeply creepy.
Because Thanatos doesn't operate like a standard medical clinic. It operates under the psychological guise of an exclusive high society club. Their motto is essentially membership by absolute invitation only.
When Bertie demands to know how they predicted the death, what do they say?
She is told she must complete the intake process first. She is handed a sleek iPad and forced to fill out a digital questionnaire. But the questions aren't just standard medical history.
You're way too personal.
They demand her exact annual income to the penny. They demand the full legal names, birth dates, and addresses of all known living family members. They require the handles and passwords of every single social media account she has ever held, active or deleted, and every email address she has ever used.
Think about the last time you blindly clicked agree on an app's terms of service on your phone just to play a game or read an article. Now imagine doing that, but you're sitting in a clinical white room and the app is demanding the keys to your entire digital and biological existence. Would you click agree?
Most people would hesitate.
And it comes with a blatant threat printed in bold at the top of the screen. Failure to disclose any requested information fully and truthfully immediately terminates the process. You either surrender everything you are or you get absolutely nothing.
It's pure extortion.
Then comes the final terms and conditions page. She has to legally agree to install the proprietary Thanatos app on all her personal electronic devices, granting it full background access. She has to sign waivers, giving them unrestricted access to all previous sealed medical records for her and her immediate family. And finally, she has to sign a draconian non-disclosure agreement.
What Thanatos is engaging in is the absolute unfettered commodification of human data, taking the concept of surveillance capitalism coined by Shoshana Zuboff and pushing it to its darkest logical extreme. They aren't just predicting a timeline, they are legally seizing ownership of the user's digital soul.
But the receptionist doesn't stop at digital data.
No, she doesn't.
She beams a robotic, perfect smile, pulls out a small biometric scanner, and says, "Now I just need to scan your fingerprints." When Bertie logically questions how the ridges on her fingertips can possibly predict the date of her death, the receptionist refuses to answer. She just repeats, like a trained parrot, "It's all part of the process, Miss Bird."
And the metal box.
Oh, yeah. She forces Bertie to place all her belongings, especially her analog phone and keys, into a locked metal box before she is permitted to see the doctor.
Bertie, who we know has a deep, trauma-informed history of avoiding the system, she refuses to even carry a smartphone to avoid being tracked, reluctantly complies because her need for answers about her grandmother overrides her paranoia.
She walks into room 9. It's a featureless, soundproof white box containing only 2 chairs and a blinking camera mounted in the corner. The doctor finally enters. He's wearing a tightly fitted bespoke waistcoat, pointy leather dress shoes, and a discreet earpiece.
He also looks strangely familiar to Bertie.
Sharing that same unnervingly symmetrical, actor-like aesthetic as the receptionist.
The ensuing dialogue with the doctor is a masterclass in psychological domination through the asymmetry of information. He doesn't sit down and ask her how she's feeling. He doesn't ask questions at all. He only makes assertions.
He already knows everything.
He leans forward and tells her that he knows her childhood IQ score was ranked as superior in school records. He knows her mother affectionately called her Bertie right before committing suicide when Olivia was a child. He weaponizes her deepest, most painful secrets to establish absolute dominance.
And then he drops the ultimate hammer.
He looks at her cold, analytical face and says, "You don't really have any loved ones left, though, do you?"
He just states it as a verified fact. He says, "Except for your dog, Sunday." It's an incredibly invasive, surgically calculated psychological blow. He is actively demonstrating total surveillance dominance. He is telling her, "We see everything you are, and we know exactly how alone you are in this world."
It's chilling.
When Bertie, trying to maintain her composure, demands to know the actual science of how they can predict an exact date of death down to the day, he outright refuses to explain the methodology. He just smoothly pivots to explaining their core business model.
The costs.
He smiles and says, "We don't charge money for this service, Miss Bird. You simply give us your time, and we tell you exactly how much you have left."
We must critically analyze what they are truly harvesting here because it certainly isn't currency. After this psychological breakdown weakens her defenses, a nurse, who is described as looking like an impossibly tall runway model, glides into the room.
What does she take?
She systematically takes 3 large vials of venous blood. She takes fingernail clippings. She takes skin cell samples using a swab. She plucks hair follicles from the root for DNA. And finally, she puts Bertie through a highly specialized, intensely loud MRI scan.
They're taking everything.
They are harvesting her complete, unadulterated biological profile, mapping her entire genomic sequence and combining it with her complete digital footprint and absolute legal compliance via the NDA.
It's essentially an actuarial table weaponized as a luxury subscription service. It's tech companies farming our daily habits for targeted shoe ads, but elevated to the ultimate dystopian nightmare. Farming human biology and generational trauma to predict, or perhaps, as you start to deeply suspect, to strategically ensure an exact expiration date.
Ensure it, exactly.
Birdie finally leaves the clinic, physically exhausted and deeply unsettled. And the very next day, a heavy black gold foil envelope is hand-delivered directly to the door of her London flat. There is no postage stamp. It didn't go through the mail. A courier physically brought it to her door.
The terrifying speed of that delivery is a calculated move meant to shock and awe the client. It reinforces the illusion of the company's omnipresent power.
Birdie sits on her sofa, opens the thick envelope, her faithful dog Sunday resting his heavy head on her lap. And she reads the crisp, embossed letter. It warmly welcomes her to the Thanatos family, cheerfully tells her to go out and live her best life, and literally wishes her a happy death day.
Happy Death Day. Just brutal.
And right there, printed dead center on the premium paper, is her exact, unchangeable date of death.
I cannot imagine the visceral, paralyzing shock of seeing your own end date printed in elegant font on a piece of paper. Birdie is completely winded. She can barely breathe. It fundamentally changes her psychology in an instant.
It shifts her entire reality.
It violently shifts her from being a person living quietly with a terminal illness, managing her decline day by day, into a person sprinting on a fixed digital countdown clock. It's an unbearable, crushing psychological weight.
And that precise feeling of running out of time, of being helplessly trapped by massive, invisible forces you cannot control or comprehend, brings us rapidly crashing back to Eden Fox in the present day.
Yes, back to the moors.
We left Eden fleeing the horrific realization at the manor in her electric car, driving blindly into the pitch-black, freezing labyrinth of Blackmore National Park. And just like Birdie staring at that letter, Eden is quite literally about to run out of time.
The car battery.
Eden's dashboard is glowing.
Yeah.
Her electric Range Rover flashes a persistent red battery warning. She ignored it earlier in her frantic panic to escape the erased house, and now, miles away from civilization, deep in the moors, the car simply dies.
It's the worst possible place.
The digital speedometer drops instantly to 0, the headlights cut out, and the electric engine shuts off with a pathetic whine. She glides to a stop. She is stranded in the absolute middle of a freezing, pitch-black moorland. There are no streetlights, no passing cars. She has no winter coat, and remember, her phone was stolen back at the house.
She is utterly, terrifyingly isolated.
Shivering uncontrollably, she pulls on that strange, soft cashmere star sweater, the very symbol of her erasure, simply to survive the plunging temperature. She cries until her tear ducts are empty and eventually passes out from sheer exhaustion, slumped over the steering wheel.
The physical isolation here mirrors her psychological isolation perfectly. She is completely cut off from technology, from society, from her family, and from her own verifiable identity. She is reduced to a state of primal survival. But then, precisely when she's at her most vulnerable and exhausted, the meticulously laid trap is finally sprung.
She wakes up a few hours later. She's freezing, her teeth chattering, her breath clouding white against the inside of the windshield. And she hears a sound, a sharp electronic ringing sound.
The burner phone.
She frantically traces it to the glove compartment. She pops it open. Inside, sitting on top of the car manual, is a clear plastic Ziploc bag holding a cheap, basic, prepaid burner phone. It is definitely not her expensive smartphone.
Someone planted it there.
The brightly lit screen says no caller ID. Her hands are shaking so badly she can barely swipe to answer, but when she does, the line instantly clicks dead. They hang up, and then a single text message pings through.
And we must dissect this text message because it is an absolute masterclass in predatory emotional manipulation.
What does it say?
The text reads, "Eden, everything is going to be okay. Go to our special place at sunrise. I'll be there. Love you to the moon and back."
Love you to the moon and back. That specific phrase is the hook. Eden immediately reaches into her pocket and pulls out the heavy silver keychain Harrison gave her when they first bought Spyglass.
It's engraved, right?
It has her name boldly engraved on one side and that exact specific phrase, "Love you to the moon and back," deeply engraved on the other. He gave it to her during a romantic, champagne-soaked picnic, sitting on the cliffs, overlooking the Hope Falls waterfall.
That's the trigger.
The moment she reads that text, her critical thinking completely, catastrophically shuts down. She looks out the window, sees a faint gray sliver of dawn light breaking over the hills, realizes she is only about a mile away from the village edge, and she kicks open the car door and starts to run.
It's a desperate, primal, frantic run. By using that highly specific, deeply sentimental anchor phrase, the orchestrator of this trap successfully bypasses all of Eden's logical defenses. Abusers frequently use sentimental triggers to manipulate cognitive load.
She's just so tired.
Eden is starving, freezing, sleep-deprived, and traumatized. She doesn't stop to ask how Harrison knew she was stranded on the moor. She doesn't ask why he's using a burner phone hidden in a Ziploc bag. She desperately, tragically believes this text is her absolute lifeline.
She runs recklessly down the steep, rocky hill, sprinting past the silent pre-dawn cafes and darkened art galleries of the Hope Falls High Street. She briefly notes how suffocatingly quiet the village is, describing the silence as swelling around her like a rising incoming tide that might physically drown her.
She's running toward the trap.
She is running blindly toward the husband who she believes is going to save her, willfully ignoring a massive parade of bright red flags because she has absolutely nothing else left to cling to. She pushes her burning muscles and reaches the top of the jagged cliffs just as the sun begins to rise.
The waterfall.
The sea below is violently angry, massive waves crashing against the jagged black rocks far below, but the cliff edge is empty. Harrison isn't there.
And she's hot from running.
Because she's been sprinting uphill in a panic for a mile, she's suddenly overheating, sweating profusely in the morning chill. So she pulls off that thick cashmere star sweater, the imposter sweater, and drops it carelessly onto the dirt path,
Leaving the evidence.
and as she stands dangerously near the very edge of the crumbling cliff, a location heavily known to locals as a tragic suicide spot, she hears the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on the gravel path directly behind her.
The agonizing realization comes far too late. She notes internally, in a moment of profound, tragic clarity, that the past is a stalker and guilt is a thief.
She takes a slow, terrified step back from the perilous edge, suddenly, acutely realizing she never should have come to such an isolated, dangerous place alone. But before she can turn around to see the face of the person who lured her there, two hands strike her back.
She is pushed.
She is violently, forcefully pushed into the abyss. She tips forward, the ground vanishing beneath her feet. She falls through the rushing mist of the waterfall. Her body is twisting and spinning violently through the air, the wind screaming in her ears, until she violently smashes onto the unforgiving rocks at the bottom of the gorge.
It's so visceral.
And you, as the listener, are given this incredibly haunting, devastating final thought from Eden as she dies. She says, if anyone ever tells you she died instantly, she didn't feel a thing, they are dead wrong. She felt everything.
Every single joy, every betrayal, every ounce of guilt she has ever experienced in that stretching fraction of a second.
And her very last conscious thought before her brain shuts off forever is a complete repudiation of her life's philosophy. True love kills.
It's a chilling, perfect narrative callback to the ominous birthday card she found amidst the shattered glass in her erased house. I love you to death. At the precise moment of her violent death, the complex equation of love she built her entire adult life upon didn't just equal zero. It equaled her total physical destruction.
The sunk cost fallacy is broken.
But only at the cost of her life. She was systematically lured to a widely known suicide spot, heavily manipulated into leaving behind a unique sweater she didn't even own as physical evidence, all to meticulously stage a cold-blooded murder to look exactly like the tragic, inevitable end to a woman's manic mental breakdown.
And the cold, calculated execution of this cover-up is exactly what we witness next, because the narrative perspective violently shifts. It is now the morning of October 31st, Halloween morning, the day immediately following the murder at the waterfall, and we are suddenly locked inside the head of the grieving husband, Harrison Wolfe.
He wakes up to the sound of loud knocking.
Wakes up to the sound of loud, persistent knocking on the heavy front door of Spyglass.
From the very first sentence of this new chapter, we must aggressively analyze Harrison as a highly unreliable narrator. He wakes up claiming he has the mother of all hangovers. His head is pounding, his mouth is dry.
But he didn't drink much.
Yet, he explicitly insists in his internal monologue that he only drank 1 or 2 glasses of wine at an art gallery opening the previous evening. His vision is swimming, the room violently tilts when he stands, and he looks down to realize he slept on top of the covers, fully dressed in yesterday's clothes. He has absolutely no memory of coming home or going to bed.
Right. And that raises massive immediate suspicions. Was he chemically drugged? Did the imposter woman, the fake bride in the photo, slip a heavy sedative into his wine so he would be a perfect, groggy, disoriented alibi when the police inevitably came knocking?
Or is it an act?
Or is Harrison, an incredible sociopathic actor, actively faking this profound confusion even in his own internal monologue to distance his conscious mind from the brutal murder he orchestrated? He stomps heavily down the stairs, irritated and angry at the incessant knocking, and yanks open the front door to find Sergeant Carter standing on the porch.
Carter looks terrible. He looks like he's visibly aged 10 years overnight. There are dark circles under his eyes. Harrison tries to play the irritated homeowner, offering coffee, but Carter declines. He just looks at Harrison and asks, his voice tight, "Mr. Wolf, when did you last see your wife?"
And Harrison plays the role of the slightly confused, innocent husband beautifully. He casually says they had a quick nightcap after the gallery, he was exhausted and went to bed early, and Eden stayed up late because she was still buzzing from the excitement of the exhibition.
He smoothly, casually inserts the detail that she sometimes goes for very early morning runs to clear her head.
And that's when Carter drops the heavy news. He says a local dog walker was out at dawn and saw a highly distressed, erratic woman running up the steep cliff path toward the waterfall. And the police have just found an item of women's clothing abandoned in the dirt near the dangerous edge.
Carter pulls out his phone.
He shows Harrison a high-resolution photo of the pale gray cashmere sweater covered in stars, the exact sweater Eden left behind. And Harrison, without missing a single emotional beat, stares at the photo, his face dropping, and says quietly, "It's Eden's. I bought it for her birthday."
Which is a massive, blaring red flag for you as the listener, because we definitively know from Eden's perspective that she absolutely did not recognize that sweater. She had never seen it before the night she was erased.
So he's lying.
Harrison boldly claiming he purchased it cements the frame job. He is actively, willingly participating in the false narrative, validating the planted physical evidence to ensure the police conclude her presence and suicidal intent at the cliff edge.
Carter softly asks if there's any chance she just left, maybe packed a bag and went to stay with a friend in London to cool off after an argument. And Harrison immediately aggressively goes on the offensive. He starts frantically rushing around the house, opening closets, shouting her name.
He sprints up the stairs to the master bedroom.
Grabs his mobile phone off the nightstand and dramatically dials Eden's number on speakerphone.
And this is the exact moment the psychological tension snaps back like a drawn rubber band. Harrison dials the number, the phone connects, and both men stand in silence. And they hear a phone vibrating and ringing.
But it's not far away.
But the sound isn't faint. It isn't coming from the moors or the bottom of the waterfall. It's muffled, but it's clearly inside the house.
Harrison runs frantically back down the stairs to the massive kitchen where Carter is standing frozen. He tracks the vibrating sound to a large bank of kitchen drawers. He yanks one open, rummages past the utensils, and there, shoved all the way to the very back, hidden under a pile of takeaway menus, is Eden's smartphone.
The screen is lighting up with Harrison's incoming call.
And Harrison simply thinks to himself, what a strange place for her to leave it.
We have to stop and ask, how did the phone physically get there? We know Eden couldn't find her phone when she was desperately tearing the house apart looking for it. If the supposed burglar who broke the glass door stole her laptop and her passport, why would they carefully hide her phone in the back of a kitchen drawer?
They wouldn't.
It implies, with cold mechanical proof, that whoever orchestrated this complex plot specifically wanted to ensure Eden was completely cut off from all outside communication when she fled to the moors. They needed her isolated so they could force her to rely entirely on the burner phone they planted in her car.
Harrison stares at the phone, then turns to Carter and demands to know if his wife is dead. Carter, trying to maintain protocol, says it's too early to make an official statement as they haven't recovered a body from the raging water. But given the height of the cliffs and the rocks, he strongly suspects she didn't survive.
And then we jump to the interview.
The narrative immediately jumps forward a few hours to Carter formally interviewing Harrison at the small village police station. And here is a wild detail. Carter is conducting this official murder inquiry interview using an old-school, clunky analog cassette tape recorder.
A cassette tape. It's just wild. Carter awkwardly explains to a bewildered Harrison that his predecessor, the old sergeant, liked doing things the traditional way, and Carter's philosophy is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it.
It's such a glaring anachronism.
The glaring anachronism of the grinding plastic cassette tape in a modern world of electric smart cars, biometric data harvesting, and Paneto's predictive algorithms is striking. It brilliantly highlights exactly how hopelessly out of his depth Carter is in dealing with this highly orchestrated, high-tech conspiracy. He is using tools from 1995 to fight a crime from 2025.
And on the recording tape, Harrison's entire demeanor shifts. He becomes incredibly defensive and hostile. He dramatically produces Evie's expensive diamond wedding and engagement rings, slamming them on the table, saying she always takes them off and leaves them behind when she goes for a sweaty run, trying to build the narrative of a spontaneous morning jog gone tragically wrong.
Carter delicately asks about the possibility of an affair or marital strife, and Harrison deflects aggressively. He pounds the table and demands to know if they found the crazy woman who broke into their house and smashed the back door the night before.
And when Carter gently asks if they have any children who need to be notified, Harrison violently snaps. He snarls, "My daughter doesn't have absolutely anything to do with this. Leave her out of it."
Notice the immediate psychological pivot. Harrison entirely drops the performance of the weeping, grieving husband and instantly shifts into ruthless CEO crisis management mode. Internally, his thoughts aren't about Eden's body broken on the rocks.
What's he thinking about?
He's actively worrying about needing his personal assistant to urgently cancel his high-level board meetings in London. He's coldly calculating the PR optics of staying in Hope Falls to play the grieving widower versus immediately leaving for the city. He explicitly thinks to himself, I am not the kind of man who gets broken by tragedy. I've had practice.
He views his wife's brutal death purely in terms of corporate damage control and script adherence. The only thing that actually causes his heart rate to spike in the interview is the sudden realization that he doesn't have a pre-prepared, media-friendly statement drafted for his wife's suicide.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
He literally went home before the interview to change into his favorite razor-sharp bespoke suit because he explicitly notes that it feels like armor, and he marches down to the police station to ensure he absolutely controls the narrative of his wife's demise.
But Harrison's meticulously crafted narrative in Hope Falls is about to be completely, spectacularly derailed, because we finally reach the shocking collision of our two timelines. It is the afternoon of October 31st, Halloween. The village is covered in fake cobwebs and carved pumpkins, and Birdie has finally returned.
Birdie has spent the last 6 months making drastic final arrangements for her abbreviated life. Driven by the absolute certainty of the Thanatos expiration date, she quit her high-powered job in London. She ruthlessly sold her beautiful flat. She gave away her precious collection of rare books. She packed her entire existence into a single suitcase and moved back to Hope Falls with her dog.
Why move back there?
She rented a tiny drafty room above the loud local pub, the Smuggler's Inn. Why? Because her death date is rapidly approaching, and she wants to spend her final, fading days in the quiet village where she was born, near the cemetery where her mother is buried.
She wakes up on Halloween morning, puts on what she considers her uniform, a crisp white shirt, a tailored tweed jacket, skinny jeans. She meticulously polishes her leather shoes, and she walks through the brisk autumn air of the village. She stops at a small cafe, orders a strong black coffee, and stands looking out at the wild, churning ocean where Eden just died.
She says to herself with absolute conviction, "Today is the first day of the end of my life, and I plan to make it a deeply good one."
She takes a slow, grounding breath, walks up the path to the little stone cottage with the bright blue door that serves as the police station, and steps inside.
Carter is sitting alone at the front desk. His feet are propped up, and he is intensely listening to the cassette tape of Harrison's defensive interview on a bulky plastic Walkman, trying to parse the lies.
And then he sees her.
When the bell chimes and he looks up to see Birdie standing in the doorway, his face becomes a picture of absolute comical horror. All the blood drains from his face. He looks like he's literally seen a ghost walking out of the fog.
He turns bright crimson red. His mind immediately jumps to the worst personal conclusion. He genuinely believes that the much older, intensely intimidating woman he had a passionate one-night stand with on a velvet sofa 6 months ago has tracked him down to his workplace.
He starts frantically stammering, tripping over his words.
Making wild excuses about how he's incredibly busy with a major crisis because a prominent local woman is missing and presumed dead, and he has to leave right this second to meet his brand new detective chief inspector who is transferring from London and starting today. He's in full panic mode, terrified she's there to confront him about their hookup and ruin his career.
And Birdie just watches him flail. And then she delivers the ultimate cinematic power move. She calmly looks at this terrified, hyperventilating boy cop, watches him desperately grab his coat to run away from his own awkwardness, and she says perfectly deadpan, You can still call me Birdie when we're alone, Sergeant, but officially, it's DCI Olivia Bird. I'm your new boss.
Boom. Carter's mouth literally drops open. The cassette tape pops in his Walkman. He stammers, Is this a joke? He looks at her casual tweed jacket, her battered red leather satchel, her massive wolf-like dog sitting obediently at her feet, and his brain simply cannot process that this woman he slept with is the highly decorated senior detective they've been desperately waiting for to take over the station.
The clash of methodologies and personalities is immediate and brilliant. You have Carter fumbling with his analog cassette tape Walkman and his naive worldview, and you have Birdie, who smoothly pulls out a small, worn leather notebook and clicks a heavy pen. She instantly seizes command of the room and the investigation.
She openly mocks his analog recording methods, stating firmly that she is an if it's not broke, break it kind of woman. She immediately demands to know the full names of the missing woman and the grieving husband.
Carter, still reeling, stutters out the names. Harrison Wolfe, Eden Fox. Birdie carefully writes them down in her notebook. She notices Carter is still staring at her in absolute shock, clearly still picturing their intimate night beneath the painted stars, and she snaps at him to get his head in the game and get used to it.
She orders him to immediately transcribe the entire cassette tape interview word for word and email the file directly to her new office. When Carter, completely bewildered, asks where her new office is in this tiny building, she gives him a sharp, wicked smirk and says, "The smuggler's inn."
Yeah. She is literally going to run a complex, high-profile murder investigation from a sticky table in the corner of a local pub.
It is a phenomenal setup. You have a brilliantly sharp, brand new detective chief inspector taking over an active investigation into a meticulously staged suicide. She's investigating a ruthless corporate husband she doesn't know, and she's being assisted by a naive, easily manipulated junior cop she recently slept with.
But the real, profound knot you have to untangle here is Birdie's internal psychological state as she takes this case. Because tucked away in the pocket of her tweed jacket is a piece of premium paper from a massive, omnipotent tech corporation explicitly telling her exactly when her biological clock will stop ticking.
And that leaves you with the ultimate chilling question to ponder. Think about it. Does knowing the exact, unchangeable date of your own death liberate you? Does it make DCI Birdie a completely fearless, unstoppable investigator with absolutely nothing left to lose, ready to tear Harrison's lies apart? Or does the absolute certainty of that expiration date make her a predictable, deeply manipulated pawn in a much larger, darker game, entirely controlled by the very same unseen corporation that handed her that death sentence in the first place? Picture yourself walking into a pub.
Okay.
It's called the Smuggler's Inn, and it's tucked away in this quiet coastal Cornish village called Hope Falls. You push open the heavy wooden door, and you are immediately hit by that classic, slightly damp pub atmosphere.
Right, the low ceilings that make you want to duck.
Exactly. Dark, exposed wooden beams that look like they were maybe salvaged from a shipwreck, a crackling open fire, all of that. But underneath the comforting, ancient smells of wood smoke and stale ale, there's this sharp, almost medicinal scent cutting through.
Fresh paint.
Fresh paint. The place has been recently redecorated. Tasteful, but maybe a little too deliberate, a little twee. And it's completely empty, except for one woman sitting alone at a sticky wooden table.
And she's methodically drinking what she calls an impression of a virgin mojito.
Yes. This is Detective Chief Inspector Olivia Bird. Birdie to her friends, though if you asked her, she wouldn't really admit to having any. She's sitting there staring at a framed print hanging behind the bar. It's one of those mass-produced, pseudo-inspirational quotes that reads, "Strangers are friends you have not yet met."
Which is quite a wholesome sentiment for a village pub.
Right, but her internal reaction to it, she calls it a crock of shit. To her, friends are just strangers in waiting. And that profound, almost suffocating cynicism is really the lens through which we are going to examine the deeply unsettling psychological warfare unfolding in this village today.
It is a brilliant establishing moment, honestly, because it instantly defines the defensive perimeter this woman operates within.
Yeah.
DCI Birdie is a highly decorated London detective. We know from the source material she turned down the George Medal. She possesses the highest arrest and conviction rates in her entire department in the city.
Which is huge.
Exactly. Yet here she is, effectively hiding out in a sleepy, postcard-perfect seaside village, poring over a local police transcript, and immediately exerting absolute dominance over her new environment.
I mean, the very first action she takes in this scene isn't to familiarize herself with the town or, greet the locals.
No, she sends a text message to the local sergeant, Luke Carter. And the text consists of a single commanding sentence See me in my office.
In all caps.
Yes, and her office, of course, being this empty pub. It's an aggressive, calculated power play. It's designed to establish a hierarchy before a single word is even spoken aloud.
I want to dig right into that power dynamic because when Carter actually walks through that heavy wooden door 5 minutes later, I mean, the air in the room practically drops 10 degrees.
You can feel the resentment radiating off him in waves.
And if we look at it from his perspective, why shouldn't he be furious? Carter is a 28-year-old local guy who has effectively been the law and order in Hope Falls for 4 years. He knows the back roads, he knows the families, he knows the history.
He wanted the promotion.
Right. He expected to be the boss. And instead, this razor-sharp outsider from London swoops in and usurps the job he felt was rightfully his. Oh, and to make the tension exponentially more unbearable, they recently had a one-night stand.
Which strips away any remaining professional distance, right? It replaces it with extreme vulnerability and hyper-defensiveness. Carter's posture here is fascinating. We're observing a man who feels profoundly threatened in the exact geographic center of his own hometown.
Yeah, he's totally off balance.
Carter's entire psychological identity is constructed around being the respected, reliable local boy. The villagers trust him, He's the custodian of their minor infractions and their quiet secrets. Suddenly, the very space he believes he controls, both his professional jurisdiction and his personal, intimate life, has been invaded and categorized by an outsider.
And Bertie is acutely aware of this fracture in his ego. She actively uses her vocabulary to patronize him. She treats him not as a colleague, but as this fascinating, slightly slow specimen under a microscope.
When she orders him around in that pub, she isn't just managing personnel. She is testing the structural integrity of his pride.
Wait, I have to push back on that slightly. Is she testing him, or is she just completely dismissing him?
How do you mean?
It feels like Bertie is treating this pub like a clean room in a laboratory. She's introducing Carter as a potential contaminant just to see how he reacts to the pressure change. But why is she so intensely abrasive? That level of cynicism about friendship, the absolute need to control the oxygen in the room, that's not just a personality quirk.
It's a barricade.
Yes, she is guarding something massive.
And that is precisely the point. The aggression is the barricade. And we see the necessity of that barricade when she begins dissecting Carter's police work from the night before. Because while Bertie was establishing her pub office, a man named Harrison Wolfe dialed 999.
Okay, let's unpack this transcript she's reading. Harrison claimed a woman was violently trying to break into his home, a very grand, historically significant local house called Spyglass.
The woman attempting to break in was screaming that she was Harrison's wife, Eden Fox.
So Carter responds to the call, eventually tracks this woman down, arrests her at a local art gallery, interviews her, decides she is erratic, crazy, and dangerous, and then
He just lets her go.
he releases a potentially violent suspect who was trying to break into a home back out into the night. It's infuriating to read. You are just screaming at the transcript, Carter, you are a police officer. What are you doing?
And Bertie rightly eviscerates him for it. But Carter actually defends his logic. He justifies letting this woman go because he claims he already knows the real Eden Fox.
Right. He met her previously. The village met her. She shopped at the local bakery. She bought meat from the butcher. She made a concerted effort to be friendly and presentable.
Therefore, in Carter's mind, the woman he arrested must be an imposter. Because why would a wealthy, respectable, well-dressed husband like Harrison Wolfe lie to the police about who his own wife is?
That logic reveals the fatal, terrifying flaw in small-town policing.
And frankly, in human psychology. Carter is entirely blinded by confirmation bias and aesthetic conformity. When Carter lets the quote-unquote fake Eden go, because he assumes he knows the real one, we have to look at the mechanics of why he believes that.
The real Eden bought bread from the local baker.
Exactly. She performed the expected rituals of rural domesticity. Therefore, she belongs in the safe category. The fake Edie acted erratically, shouted, and broke the social contract. Therefore, she is an anomaly to be discarded.
Carter allows his deep-seated desire for a peaceful, predictable village to completely override his empirical duty to investigate conflicting claims.
He doesn't gather evidence to find the truth. He gathers evidence to confirm the reality he prefers.
It makes you wonder how often we do that in our own lives, right? We constantly grant the benefit of the doubt to people who fit our aesthetic definition of normal or respectable, while heavily penalizing those who display messy, uncomfortable emotions.
We do it all the time.
Carter gave Harrison a pass because Harrison has money, a nice house, and a calm demeanor. Husbands lie all the time, but Carter couldn't see past the expensive suit.
And this brings us to the actual physical document Bertie is reading in the pub. Carter's interview transcript with Harrison Wolfe from earlier that very day.
Yep.
Because now, the real Eden Fox Contee, the quiet bakery visiting wife, is completely missing.
Right. And Harrison is stonewalling the police.
He refuses to provide contact details for their 18-year-old daughter, Gabriella. He insists his wife had absolutely no friends. Eventually, Carter presses him on his employment.
And Harrison reveals that he is the CEO of a London-based pharmaceutical and tech company called Thanatos.
Yes, and the exact moment Bertie's eyes scan the word Thanatos on the page, her entire physical reality collapses. The walls of the pub seem to fold inward. Her equilibrium shatters.
She grabs the edge of the sticky table, thrown into a massive, debilitating physical panic attack. She desperately digs into her satchel, dry-swallowing pills just stop the room from spinning.
This completely flips the script.
It does. The abrasive shield, the rushing, the ruthlessness, the utter lack of patience with Carter, it instantly makes perfect, tragic sense. Because Bertie isn't just a burnt-out London cop looking for a quieter life by the sea. Hope Falls isn't a retreat.
It's a hospice.
Bertie is dying. And the reason the name Thanatos triggers a literal physical collapse is that Thanatos is the exact company that predicted the specific day she will die.
The mechanism of this revelation changes everything we thought we knew about her motivations. If we look at the philosophical weight of knowing your exact death date, it alters the fundamental calculus of human behavior.
It has to, yeah.
For the vast majority of us, life is lived under the comforting illusion of an open-ended tomorrow. We procrastinate, we tolerate boredom, we endure unsatisfying conversations because time feels like an infinite resource.
But for Bertie, time is a finite, rapidly depleting currency. She possesses a ticking clock, and she can see the numbers counting down.
It strips away all societal pretense. Why would she care about Carter's bruised ego? Why would she engage in small talk? She doesn't have the luxury of patience.
It explains why she moved back to the village of her childhood. She is attempting to exert geographical control over an uncontrollable biological reality.
And the staggering irony here is that the architect of her existential dread, Harrison Wolfe, the CEO holding the stopwatch on her life, is the primary suspect in her new missing persons case.
And he is living in her dead grandmother's old house spyglass. The psychological whiplash is almost too much to bear.
But Bertie is a professional.
Right. She rides out the panic attack, washes the pills down with the rest of her fake mojito, opens her laptop, and does what any of us would do.
Yeah.
She Googles Harrison Wolfe.
And she finds absolutely nothing.
Nothing. No social media, no LinkedIn, no corporate press releases, just a void.
Which is an incredibly specific type of red flag. As Bertie notes, being a true ghost online in 2026 means one of two things. You either value your privacy to an almost pathological degree, or you have something monumental to hide.
Have you ever tried to completely erase yourself from the web? It's nearly impossible.
In Harrison's case, the mechanics of achieving that level of digital erasure are profound. You don't just delete your Facebook app to disappear. It requires scrubbing data brokers, utilizing proxy ownerships, hiding assets behind layers of shell corporations.
Actively suppressing search engine optimization.
Exactly. And employing a small army of legal and technical experts armed with ironclad non-disclosure agreements. It requires vast liquid wealth.
It tells Bertie that Harrison is heavily insulated. He operates in the absolute shadows of the corporate tech world, completely accustomed to controlling his narrative by erasing his tracks.
So Bertie summons Carter again.
She makes a point of riding her beat-up Vespa scooter up the hill, forcing Carter to follow slowly behind in his pristine marked police car.
Another brilliant little power play.
They arrive at Spyglass, the house Bertie inherited from her grandmother and quickly sold. Harrison opens the door. He looks immaculate in an expensive suit, completely unbothered, and immediately informs them that they are interrupting an important Zoom call.
Consider the psychology of that statement. Your wife might have been murdered, or she might have committed suicide, and your primary articulated concern to the homicide detectives at your front door is your corporate scheduling.
It's wild.
It signals a profound, almost chilling emotional detachment. He is prioritizing his artificial corporate reality over the physical absence of his spouse.
But Bertie doesn't even blink. She sidesteps him and walks right into the house.
Yep.
And here is where we see Bertie operate as a self-proclaimed human lie detector.
She immediately sends Carter to the kitchen to make tea.
Deliberately belittling him in front of the suspect to throw Harrison off balance. Once she has the space, she starts scanning. She spots things Carter entirely missed.
The bed in the master bedroom is perfectly made with crisp, fresh sheets.
The washing machine is actively running downstairs.
She subtly bags Eden's hairbrush to secure uncontaminated DNA. She raids the medicine cabinet, pocketing random pills.
But the real turning point happens when they walk into the library. It's a dusty room with ancient, slightly wonky bookcases. Birdie stops dead in her tracks, looks at the shelves, and says, "A crime has been committed here."
And Carter thinks she's making a weird London joke. He literally asks, "But painting bookcases, how is that a crime?"
Yeah. Carter is looking for obvious violence, blood spatter, broken glass, overturned furniture. He misses the significance of the bookcases because he doesn't understand the psychology of structural alteration.
Birdie knows this house intimately. She knows that specific property carried a strict legal covenant forbidding the alteration of those historic fixtures. Now, on the surface, breaching a historic property covenant is a matter for a civil lawyer, not a homicide detective.
Right.
But Birdie understands that when a wealthy, sophisticated couple moves into a historic home, they do not haphazardly slap fresh paint over legally protected antique woodwork unless they are driven by sheer desperation.
If you are staging a crime scene, you clean the surfaces, you make the bed, you run the washing machine to destroy fibers on the clothes, but you don't redesign the architecture.
Precisely. Surface cleaning is about erasing physical evidence of an event. Altering architecture, like painting ancient bookcases, suggests a frantic need to cover up physical damage to the structure itself.
Wow.
It implies a violent struggle that scarred the wood, or perhaps the desperate concealment of a structural secret. It demonstrates a complete disregard for legal rules, driven by an immediate, terrifying necessity to hide something permanent.
And Harrison's behavior during this walkthrough is entirely performative. He doesn't argue. He willingly hands over his brand new iPhone. He actively shows Birdie the last text messages he sent to Eden.
Messages that say, "I'm so proud of you tonight, love you, X."
Birdie clocks this instantly. If Harrison and Eden came home together from the art gallery, as he claims, why is he texting her that he loves her from another room? You just say it to their face.
He is meticulously constructing a digital paper trail. He wants the police to find those texts.
He is attempting to engineer a specific narrative of the grieving, loving husband. But the performance is too flawless. It lacks the messy, chaotic reality of genuine human relationships, especially in the midst of a crisis.
He is treating the police investigation the same way he treats his company, as a data set that can be manipulated through careful inputs.
Which brings us to the terrifying reality of his company, Thanatos. We get to step out of the investigation and directly into Harrison's mind, and it is incredibly dark.
We learn the actual mechanics of how Thanatos operates. They predict human death using a combination of artificial intelligence, bespoke algorithms, and intense DNA analysis.
But the detail that really makes your stomach drop, the quote-unquote doctors that the clients sit down with to receive their terminal news, they aren't doctors. They have zero medical training.
They're out-of-work actors.
Harrison hires them because they are cheap, they gladly sign NDAs, and they do exactly what he tells them to do. He literally feeds them their lines through a hidden earpiece, like a director manipulating a puppet.
This requires a massive ethical deconstruction. What does it mean when a tech CEO uses an NDA to psychologically replace the Hippocratic Oath?
It's a terrifying thought.
Doctors are bound by an ancient ethical duty to do no harm, to prioritize the patient's well-being. Actors are bound by a legal contract to protect corporate secrets and secure their paycheck. Harrison views human life, and specifically human mortality, purely as raw data to be aggressively monetized.
By using actors to deliver terminal diagnoses, he entirely removes ethical friction and human empathy from the process. He controls the tone, the pacing, the exact phrasing of how someone learns they're going to die.
He has an absolute god complex. He literally named the company Thanatos, after the Greek god of death.
The twin brother of sleep who carries mortals down to the underworld. He unironically compares his work to Alexander Fleming discovering penicillin or Marie Curie discovering radium.
He genuinely believes he is elevating humanity by removing the uncertainty of mortality. He argues he is giving people the ultimate budgetary tool, the exact measure of their remaining time.
But beneath that grand philosophical posturing, the origin of this technology is rooted in something incredibly petty and mundane. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The origin story of Thanatos isn't a noble quest to cure cancer. It's born entirely out of spite.
Yes. Harrison reveals that his mother was a cruel, emotionally abusive woman. She didn't hit him, but she battered his psyche. On the day he finally left home, her parting words to him were, You'll never amount to anything.
He grew up cold, hungry, and terrified of her shifting moods, constantly wishing she had died instead of his father.
So he didn't build a billion-dollar AI to save lives. He built it specifically to calculate the exact date his mother would die, just so he could mathematically quantify how much longer he had to endure her existence.
And the darkest punchline of all, the very first death date the algorithm ever successfully predicted was his mother's.
It is the ultimate weaponization of childhood trauma. He took his deep-seated psychological wound, his profound hatred, and turned it into a predictive algorithm.
But the narrative introduces a brilliant, tragic duality to Harrison's character. While his mother's death date was a triumph of spite, he is currently consumed by an obsessive, terrified love for his 18-year-old daughter, Gabriella.
10 years ago, Gabriella was in a horrific accident. She is now in a persistent vegetative state, living at an extortionately expensive, high-security luxury care facility called The Manor.
He visits her, talks to her, completely unable to let go of a child trapped in a young woman's body. And just as his mother's death date was the first he got right, he admits that Gabriella's death date was the first he ever desperately hoped the algorithm got wrong.
That completely shatters the illusion of the cold, calculating tech bro. Beneath the NDAs and the algorithms, he is driven entirely by pure animal fear.
He poured all his genius into predicting death because he was absolutely terrified of losing his daughter.
And the cruel irony is, by dedicating his life to building Thanatos, he threw away the precious actual time he could have spent with her before the accident.
His entire philosophy crumbles when confronted with Gabriella's mortality. He tells his clients that time is money and money is time, justifying his deceit as a service. But when it comes to his own flesh and blood, all the money and data in the world cannot buy him a single extra second.
It proves that despite his God complex, he is just as fragile, desperate, and powerless as the clients he manipulates through earpieces.
Now, Harrison isn't the only man in Hope Falls trying to desperately control a narrative to cover up his own fragility. We need to look back at Sergeant Luke Carter.
Because we finally get a look behind Carter's nice guy, local hero persona, and it is deeply unsettling. Carter has been harboring a massive secret from Birdie.
He actually knew Eden Fox quite intimately.
A few weeks before she vanished, Eden came into the police station. She was terrified. She told Carter someone was watching her house, watching her every move. And how did this sworn protector of the village react?
He gave her a glass of whiskey.
He flirted with her, he noticed the physical bruises on her arms, and then he kissed her.
This revelation forces us to entirely reevaluate Carter's investigation. His intense defensiveness around Birdie isn't just about professional jealousy. It is fueled by a profound, suffocating guilt.
Carter saw the empirical evidence of domestic abuse, the bruises, the terror. But instead of acting as an objective law enforcement officer, he engaged in a narcissistic fantasy.
He wanted to play the romantic hero. He actually fantasized about saving her from her wealthy husband, imagining her returning to the station, undoing her dress, and offering herself to him out of gratitude.
He fundamentally objectified her vulnerability. It's sickening. He failed to protect a victim who explicitly asked for his help because he was too busy directing his own romantic movie in his head.
And now that Eden is missing, and potentially dead, how does that failure corrupt his police work?
It destroys any semblance of objectivity. Carter needs Harrison Wolfe to be the monster. He is desperate to pin the disappearance on the husband, not necessarily because the evidence points there, but because it provides Carter with psychological absolution.
If Harrison is a brilliant, unstoppable, murderous tech villain, then Carter can tell himself that nothing he did or didn't do would have saved Eden. Pinning the crime on Harrison is Carter's subconscious strategy for escaping his own complicity in her fate.
And this modern guilt is playing out against a backdrop of incredibly creepy local folklore. Carter remembers telling Eden about the town's annual Day of the Dead festival, which falls on November 1st.
And ominously, that date is just days away in our story.
We get the full, chilling history of this festival from Diana Harris, the local art gallery owner. Diana is basically the town's resident Black Widow. She's outlived 3 husbands and casually mentions that she drinks a spoonful of the last one's ashes in her morning tea.
Diana is the perfect vessel for the town's ancestral memory. The legend she recounts is vital. In 1878, a smuggler's ship called the Serendipity washed up in Blackwater Bay.
The locals rowed out and found the ship entirely abandoned.
But the terrifying detail is the preservation of life in the absence of bodies. The dining table in the captain's quarters was perfectly set. The candles were still burning. The food on the plates was piping hot, but completely untouched.
The goblets were full of wine. The entire crew had simply evaporated into the mist. To commemorate these lost souls, the villagers march down to the bay every single year and burn a wooden boat on the sand.
It paints such a vivid, haunting picture. But how does an 1878 ghost ship connect to a missing tech wife in 2026?
It establishes the psychological landscape of Hope Falls. The untouched, warm dinner on the Serendipity evokes the sudden, violent disruption of domestic normalcy. Exactly what we see at Spyglass with the running washing machine and the freshly made bed.
Eaton Fox has vanished into thin air, mirroring the lost crew. The town has a deep generational history of swallowing people whole without offering an explanation.
The geography itself, the jagged cliffs, the hidden bays, the treacherous tides, is characterized as an active, hungry entity. Burning the boat isn't merely a remembrance. It's a pagan appeasement to a landscape that frequently consumes the unwary.
That is deeply unsettling. It's a village built on a foundation of unresolved vanishings. And speaking of the village, let's look at the socioeconomic reality of Hope Falls today.
Bertie and Carter decide to have a quote-unquote working lunch back at the Smuggler's Inn. During this lunch, we learn that Maddie, the quiet, bookish barmaid, is actually Carter's older sister.
And we finally uncover the root of Carter's bitter resentment toward outsiders. For 30 years, Carter's parents ran this very pub. It was his childhood home.
But a few years ago, during a massive surge in coastal tourism, a corporate brewery outbid them for the freehold. His parents were evicted from their livelihood and their home, essentially gentrified out of the village they helped build, forced to retire to Spain.
And Carter is hiding the devastating secret that the stress of losing the pub caused his mother to develop cancer.
This is the critical socioeconomic undercurrent driving the entire narrative. It perfectly frames Carter's worldview. To Carter, wealthy outsiders don't just visit Cornwall, they conquer it.
They buy up the history, they push out the working-class locals, and they literally paint over the memories. The fresh paint Bertie smelled in the opening scene. That was the brewery painting over the hype marks Carter's parents had drawn on the wall as he grew up.
Harrison Wolfe, with his London tech billions and his painted historic bookcases, is the absolute embodiment of this destructive, erasing force.
But uncomfortably for Carter, DCI Bertie represents the exact same threat. Even though she spent summers here as a child, she's the educated, privileged London elite who swooped in and took his job.
And nothing highlights Bertie's absolute rigid separation from the locals more than her lunch order. It is borderline psychopathic in its precision.
She orders the smuggler's ultimate burger, but she demands it be completely deconstructed.
I mean, listen to these instructions. No lettuce, no tomato. She will accept onions, but only if they are fried. Any sauce or relish must be served strictly on the side in individual ramekins, absolutely not touching anything else.
She only wants the bun, the meat, and melted cheese on the plate. The meat must be cooked medium to, well, strictly no blood, and absolutely no salt on her fries.
When the food arrives, she sits there, methodically dismantles the burger to ensure it meets her exact specifications, cuts it into 4 geometrically perfect quarters, and eats the entire thing while Carter just stares at her, his own appetite completely ruined.
It is a remarkable scene, because her order is a profound metaphor for her existential state. If we examine the mechanics of how Bertie interacts with the world, she approaches her food exactly how she approaches a homicide investigation, and exactly how she wishes she could approach her own failing biology.
Methodical, separated into distinct manageable parts and subjected to her microscopic control. Everything in her life must be categorized and contained. Relish in ramekins, no cross-contamination.
But wait, couldn't you argue that she's just a cop who is used to dismantling alibis, so she just dismantles her lunch by habit? Is it really that deep?
It is deeply biological. She controls her food with this tyrannical rigidity precisely because she cannot control her own cells. Her body is actively betraying her in the most fundamental, terrifying way possible.
She cannot stop the agonizing pain attacks. She cannot change the date tornadoes predicted, so she overcompensates.
She exerts absolute, uncompromising control over her external environment, her subordinates, her crime scenes, and her lunch. The deconstructed burger provides a fleeting illusion of order in reality that is rapidly spiraling into biological chaos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bertie controls her food because she can't control her cells. That perfectly bridges the gap between her abrasive personality and her terminal diagnosis.
But while Bertie is eating her highly organized feelings, Harrison Wolfe is physically dismantling his own reality. Back at Spyglass, we finally discover why those library bookcases were painted.
Because when Harrison was renovating, he found a hollow sound behind the wood. He takes a sledgehammer to the shelves, smashing through the antique wood, and uncovers a secret, ancient door.
A door that opens into a dark, damp dirt tunnel carved directly into the cliff rock. The childhood myths Carter used to believe in, the tales of smuggler tunnels running on the coast all the way up into the cellars of the grand houses, are entirely real, and Harrison is using them.
The physical architecture of Spyglass perfectly mirrors the hidden psychology of its owner. Harrison is a man who lives his entire life on a polished digital surface. He hides behind sophisticated AI algorithms, expensive tailored suits, and ironclad legal documents.
Yet, to conceal his actual physical sins, he is forced to descend into the muddy, ancient earth. The tunnel represents the subversion of his sleek corporate facade. He has to literally crawl in the dirt to maintain his pristine exterior above ground.
And this tunnel clearly leads down to the treacherous coast. Because while Birdie is finishing her lunch, she sends Carter on an errand that feels designed just to humiliate him. She makes him walk her dog.
A massive, intimidating wolf dog named Sunday. Carter takes Sunday down to Blackwater Bay, the exact beach where the Serendipity ghost ship washed up.
The weather turns violent, a storm rolls in, and suddenly Sunday is swimming way too far out into the churning, freezing ocean. Carter panics. He is about to strip off his uniform and swim after the dog, genuinely terrified that Birdie will murder him if her dog drowns.
But then a sound cuts through the howling wind. A sharp, distinct whistle. 2 notes, one high, one low. It is the exact, identical acoustic command Birdie uses. The dog instantly turns and swims back to shore.
Carter spins around and sees a figure dressed entirely in black, standing on the rocks on the far side of the bay.
The paranoia in this moment is palpable. A whistle is an acoustic signature of authority. For an unknown, disguised figure to possess the specific auditory key required to command Birdie's dog suggests an intimate level of surveillance.
Or a haunting, deliberate replication of her control. Carter reacts purely on instinct. He is the fastest runner in the local force. He immediately gives chase, scrambling over the slick rocks and sand dunes, closing the distance on the man in black.
But when he finally crests the rocks, the man is gone. He vanishes completely, despite there being absolutely nowhere to hide on the open, barren cliff face.
It's physically impossible. Unless, of course, that man knows about a secret smuggler's tunnel carved into the rock face.
Carter stands there, lungs burning, disoriented, and realizes with a sickening jolt of recognition that the man he was chasing had the exact build and gait of Harrison Wolfe.
But before Carter can even begin to process the implications of a tech billionaire scrambling around the cliffs in black tactical gear, the narrative slams us with a brutal, visceral twist.
Because someone else is at Blackwater Bay that afternoon. Diana Harris, the gallery owner, is taking her daily sea swim, and as the tide recedes, she discovers a body washed up on the sand.
The transition from the ethereal, almost ghostly chase on the cliffs to the heavy, rotting reality of the corpse is incredibly jarring, and deliberately so.
Carter rushes back to the pub to alert Birdie. They practically sprint back to the beach, and the scene waiting for them is grotesque.
The body belongs to a woman. She's wearing standard clothes jeans and a t-shirt. She has long blonde hair, matted with seawater and seaweed. She is roughly Eden Fox's height and build.
But when Birdie gently rolls the body over to check for identification, the face is gone. It is completely, utterly pulverized by the rocks. It is a bloody, unrecognizable ruin of skin and bone. There are no teeth left for dental records.
The destruction of the face is the ultimate erasure of identity. What stands out to you about a body with no face? In an investigation where the central conflict revolves around 2 different women claiming to be Eden Fox, the sudden appearance of a faceless corpse is an act of forensic convenience that borders on the malicious.
It forces the investigation into a state of absolute paralyzing ambiguity.
The primary human identifier, the face, has been violently stripped away by the environment. It is the landscape, the jagged rocks of Hope Falls, actively participating in the act of silencing the victim.
Carter takes one look at the ruined body, turns around, and violently vomits onto the sand. His romantic fantasies of saving women are completely shattered by the brutal reality of death.
But Birdie's reaction is entirely different. Birdie looks down at this mangled, faceless corpse, and for a split second, time rewinds. She doesn't see a victim. She briefly hallucinates the face of her own dead mother superimposed on the ruin.
And then, standing over the body while Carter is busy wiping his mouth, Birdie delivers this incredibly dark, chilling monologue.
Right.
She says, "A body is brilliant, but weak. A A miracle, but also a failure in waiting. A body is a walking, talking life support machine that will inevitably fail you, and when it stops working, you will stop living. Eventually, dictated by your popularity, you will be forgotten. A body is the prison that gives you a life sentence and determines your death. That's all a body is.
It is a moment of profound, terrifying psychological projection. Birdie is not eulogizing a murder victim. She is staring directly at her own inevitable future.
Her anger at Carter's weakness, his vomiting, his inability to detach his emotions from the biology in front of him is rooted in her own furious battle with her failing body.
When she calls the human form a prison that gives you a life sentence, we are hearing the worldview of a woman who knows exactly which day her sentence ends. By reducing the human form to nothing more than a fragile, failing machine, she is desperately attempting to strip death of its emotional terror.
If a body is merely a machine, then a machine breaking down is just physics. It's not a tragedy, it's an inevitability.
It is so incredibly bleak. She leaves Carter standing on the freezing beach to guard the body from the seagulls and heads back to the village.
But the horror of this day is far from over. We cut back to Harrison Wolfe, and this sequence is pure psychological terror. We realize Carter's instincts were right. It was Harrison on the beach in the black clothes.
He crawls back through that ancient dirt tunnel, pulling himself through the darkness on his hands and knees. He emerges into his library, completely covered in mud, sand, sweat, and the victim's blood.
And we finally learn his motive for this subterranean excursion. He wasn't just observing the ocean. Before Eden vanished, he had planted a microscopic GPS tracker inside the phone he left in her car.
He used that tracker to locate the body on the beach before the police arrived. He admits to himself that he didn't even look closely at the faceless woman. He simply reached his hand into her wet pocket, retrieved the phone wrapped in a plastic bag, and left her to the elements.
His primary concern in the presence of a mutilated corpse is not grief. It is data retrieval and corporate risk mitigation.
He strips off all his soiled, bloody clothes and throws them directly into the roaring fireplace, frantically burning the evidence. He is desperate to literally wash away the physical reality of what he's just done.
He goes upstairs to the master bathroom. The lavish bathroom Eden recently redecorated in cold marble and granite, and steps into the shower. He cranks the water temperature up until it is scalding, actively punishing his own skin, just to feel something through the emotional numbness.
He stays in there for a long time, letting the hot water beat down on him. The entire bathroom fills with a thick, suffocating fog of steam. Finally, he turns off the water, wraps a towel around his waist, and steps out to look at himself in the mirror.
The mirror is a powerful recurring motif for him. He previously noted his wife's warning, your biggest enemy is always the person you see in the mirror.
Exactly. He expects to confront his own reflection. But he can't see himself. The glass is completely misted over with thick condensation.
But he isn't staring at his reflection anyway. He is staring at a word that someone has physically written in the steam on the glass. One single accusatory word. LIRR.
This completely shatters his fragile sense of control. The immediate, terrifying question is who wrote it. Is Harrison's mind finally fracturing? Is his subconscious guilt so overwhelming that he is projecting his self-hatred onto his environment, manifesting as a stress-induced hallucination?
Or, far more horribly, has his physical fortress been breached? Has someone been inside the house, moving silently through the steam, leaving a physical indictment just inches from where he stood, vulnerable and naked?
It destroys the boundary between his internal psychological guilt and an external physical threat.
It leaves you absolutely breathless. But the narrative doesn't leave us in Harrison's terror. It takes us back to the Smuggler's Inn at midnight. The pub is pitch black. The village is asleep.
Birdie is sitting alone at a table in the dark, waiting for Carter to return from processing the faceless corpse. And suddenly, she is hit by a second pain attack.
But this one dwarfs the one from earlier. It is absolute agony and drops her straight to her knees on the hard floor. She forgot to take her medication. She hasn't eaten anything since she picked apart that deconstructed burger, and her body is staging a violent, undeniable rebellion.
She grips the table leg, unable to draw breath, realizing with terrifying clarity that her time is slipping away much faster than Thanatos predicted. And right at that moment of absolute, humiliating vulnerability, Carter walks through the door.
The power dynamic we analyzed in the very first scene is completely irreversibly inverted here. The untouchable, brilliant, patronizing London detective is reduced to agonizing physical helplessness. Her defensive mask has completely dissolved.
She cannot command the room. She cannot even stand up. And Carter, the bruised local boy she has been actively belittling all day, Sudden becomes her sole lifeline.
He doesn't panic. He doesn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply asks what he needs to do. She manages to gasp out that her pills are in a bag under her bed upstairs.
And instead of running up to get them, Carter simply scoops her up. He picks her up in his arms and carries her up the narrow stairs to her bedroom. It's an act of sudden, profound intimacy that bypasses all their previous hostility.
He places her gently on the bed, retrieves the hidden pills, gets her a glass of water, and stands there watching her swallow them. She curls into a tight ball, waiting for the chemical relief to kick in, and weakly tells him to go home. She is still desperate to hide this profound weakness from him.
But Carter refuses the dismissal. He insists on staying until he knows the crisis has passed. He goes downstairs to the dark bar, and when he returns to her room, he brings a gesture of quiet, incredibly observant care.
Despite her abrasive behavior, despite her demanding, psychotic lunch order earlier that day, he brings her what he can manage from a closed pub. A packet of cheese and onion crisps, a deconstructed dinner, if you will, and he has carefully mixed her a virgin mojito.
It is such a tender, fragile moment against the backdrop of a town completely saturated in deceit and a faceless corpse washing up on the rocks. Carter hands her the drink. Two people, burdened by massive, unspoken secrets. Birdie's terminal illness and Carter's deep complicity in Eden's disappearance, finding a strange, silent alliance in the dark.
It makes you wonder, if you knew exactly how many days you had left, would you spend them furiously trying to expose the liars around you, or would you finally allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to let someone hand you a drink in the dark? Today, we are pulling apart the fourth act of this incredibly twisted narrative in the Hope Falls mystery. And, our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack the psychology of deeply flawed investigators.
Right.
Because what happens when the people tasked with finding the truth are, entirely built on lies themselves? We're going to look at the psychological breaking points of these characters. We're stepping away from just a strict chronological timeline to really analyze the architecture of deception they've built around themselves.
Yeah, and it's a crucial shift in how we understand this story.
Yeah.
Because up until now, you might have viewed this as a pretty standard police procedural.
Totally.
But what this section of the source material reveals is that we aren't looking at an investigative landscape where objective detectives pursue elusive suspects.
No, not at all.
Right, we are looking at a mirror maze. The detectives and the suspects are suffering from the exact same psychological delusions. I mean, primarily the illusion of control and, well, selective blindness.
Exactly. And to get into that illusion of control, we really have to look at the inciting incident of this entire section. It's the morning after DCI. Olivia Bird, Birdie and her subordinate, Sergeant Luke Carter, sleep together.
Oh, yeah, that scene.
The power dynamics in this room are absolutely suffocating, but it's not just about workplace impropriety. It's really about Birdie's terminal illness. She has this diagnosis foretold by a program called Thanatos.
Yeah, the death clock.
Right, which she describes as having a death clock ticking inside her mind.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of a terminal diagnosis, because it completely rewrites a person's behavioral rulebook.
How so?
Well, when you are confronted with your own mortality on a specific algorithmic timeline, the social and professional boundaries you've spent, decades building just start to look incredibly trivial.
I mean, that makes sense.
Birdie isn't seeking comfort in Carter because she's some predator leveraging her authority. She's doing it because the total isolation of dying is infinitely worse than the professional risk of sleeping with a subordinate.
Right.
She is experiencing a profound loss of autonomy. Her own body is betraying her,
Wait, let me push back on that a bit, though. I understand the terror of the illness, but the power dynamic is still wild. I mean, she is his superior officer.
Sure.
She holds his career in her hands. So is Carter genuinely just a comforting presence to her? Or is he, taking advantage of a woman whose armor is cracking?
That's the big question.
Because he slips out at 4 a.m., creeping past Birdie's dog, Sunday. And Sunday, by the way, acts as this incredibly silent, furry judge in the scene, which I love.
It's a great detail.
Before he leaves, he snoops. He actually digs through her bag.
And that snooping is actually the key to understanding his motivation.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, because he looks inside her bag and finds what he describes as enough pills to have robbed a chemist.
Right, it's a massive amount of medication.
And he recognizes a very heavy medication that his own mother takes. So it's his moment he realizes she is hiding a massive, dark secret about her health.
Yeah.
But notice his reaction. It doesn't repel him. It doesn't make him feel manipulated by his boss. It triggers this profound, almost desperate protective urge.
Which feels totally paradoxical. You find out Your highly competent boss is secretly severely ill, and your instinct is to go rogue.
Well, because you have to look at what's driving Carter. He is plagued by a deep-seated inferiority complex.
Oh, absolutely.
He constantly feels like a disappointment. To his family, to his wife, and most acutely, to Bertie. He thinks she views him as a completely useless man.
Yeah, he's carrying a lot of baggage.
So armed with this new secret knowledge of her vulnerability, he even heard her talking in her sleep, saying things that really terrified him. He suddenly sees an opportunity to not be useless.
He wants to fix it.
Exactly. He wants to prove his worth.
Yeah.
He wants to be the hero who solves the case for her before her clock runs out.
So his way of being the hero is to directly disobey her explicit orders to stay away from the manor. He heads out there to interview Gabriella Wolfe, the daughter of the man at the center of the case.
Which is incredibly reckless.
So reckless. But before we follow him to the manor, I want to linger on how Bertie deals with this loss of autonomy. Because it's brilliantly illustrated in this tiny scene later that morning at the Driftwood Cafe.
Oh, with Kath.
Yes, she meets Kath, who serves her breakfast on the house and offers this profoundly bleak wisdom. She says, people only care about the people they care about, and these days that's often themselves.
Kath really operates as this indifferent oracle in the story.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That line hits Bertie so hard because it echoes her own internal terror of being entirely forgotten after she dies.
Right.
But the most revealing part of that cafe scene isn't the dialogue at all. It's the physical action.
Yes. Bertie deliberately separating her bacon and eggs so they don't touch.
It is a visceral manifestation of a coping mechanism.
I completely agree.
When your body is spiraling, right?
Okay.
When your very cells are mutating or failing, you cling to whatever microscopic fragments of the universe you can still command.
You control the food on your plate.
Exactly. You ensure the proteins don't touch the fats. It's the illusion of order amidst internal chaos. Every character in this narrative is doing some version of separating their bacon and eggs. They're compartmentalizing their lives to avoid dealing with the mess.
Let's talk about the ultimate attempt to compartmentalize and control the mess, which is the Thanatos program created by Harrison Wolfe.
Yeah, the big tech element.
This is the machine that supposedly gave Bertie her ticking death clock. But we really need to unpack how a program like this even functions conceptually, because it completely drives the hubris of Harrison's entire character.
It's a really important concept to demystify. Thanatos isn't a crystal ball, It's an extreme application of predictive analytics and actuarial science.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, in the real world, life insurance companies already use massive data sets. Genetic markers, family history, lifestyle choices, environmental factors, zip codes. They use all this to calculate life expectancy with unnerving accuracy.
Right, that's just standard industry practice.
But what Harrison Wolfe attempts to do with Thanatos is take that existing actuarial math and supercharge it. He feeds it real-time biometric data and these proprietary algorithms to pinpoint not just a general decade of death, but a specific timeline.
It's the ultimate God complex. You take the one fundamental unknown of the human experience, so like, when are we actually going to die? And you turn it into a data output.
Exactly. Harrison has spent his life and all his venture capital trying to conquer mortality through code. He views life as a ladder. It's just a series of controllable variables to him.
Right.
But the tragic irony is that while he was busy trying to mathematically predict the future, he completely ignored the present.
The accident.
Yes. 10 years ago, on his daughter Gabriella's 8th birthday, she wanted the training wheels off her bike. But Harrison was too obsessed with securing funding for Thanatos to teach her. He left her with his wife, Eden, and the accident happened.
And that accident completely shatters Gabriella's mind, which brings us to the second major theme here. Psychological fortresses and selective blindness.
Oh, this part is so dark.
Because Carter's rogue mission takes him to the manor, which is deep in the 50-mile expanse of Blackmore National Park. He describes it as looking like Downton Abbey, but functioning like a high-end prison.
Yeah, he's led to room 13. And the isolation of the manor is essential context here. It's off the map, both geographically and socially.
Right.
It is essentially where the ultra-wealthy hide their unfixable problems.
And inside room 13 is 18-year-old Gabriella Wolfe. She is physically stunning. She's a brilliant artist, but mentally she is entirely frozen at the age of 8.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. The hostel nurse there, Ingrid, explains she suffers from selective mutism due to the severe trauma of that bike accident. But let's really break down what that means, because, selective mutism sounds like a choice. It sounds like she's just throwing a tantrum and refusing to talk.
That is a very common misconception.
Right.
The clinical reality of selective mutism, especially when it's triggered by severe trauma, is that it is an anxiety disorder. It is not behavioral defiance. When Gabriella experienced that trauma at 8 years old, her amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, essentially hijacked her nervous system.
Wow.
In environments or situations that trigger that baseline anxiety, the vocal cords literally paralyze. The brain enters a permanent freeze state of the fight-or-flight response.
So she physically cannot speak.
Exactly. She cannot speak. Her mind retreated into the fortress of her 8-year-old self just to survive a reality that was too painful to process. Her parents couldn't care for her at home, so she ended up here.
And the physical environment of room 13 reflects that fortress. Carter notices a detail that is just haunting. There are absolutely no mirrors in the room. He actually compares the vibe to The Shining.
Yeah, and the reason for no mirrors is because she doesn't recognize her 18-year-old self.
That is so eerie.
Her cognitive development stopped at the moment of the trauma.
Mm.
If she sees a reflection of an adult woman, she believes a stranger is in the room with her, which triggers massive panic.
So she's trapped.
She is trapped in amber. The world has moved forward 10 years, her body has matured, but her mind absolutely refuses to let time pass.
But she is still processing her reality through her art, right? Carter watches her paint a watercolor of her childhood home, Spyglass. She paints it beautifully, but then she adds these tiny, telling details. A little fox on one side of the house and a wolf on the other.
Right, because even locked inside her own mind, the subconscious is always working to categorize threats.
And names.
Exactly. Her mother's maiden name is Eden Fox. Her father is Harrison Wolf.
Wow.
She is projecting her parents as predatory or at least wild, unpredictable animals surrounding her home. She instinctively understands the danger her family represents, even if she can't articulate it verbally.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the moment where the silence of room 13 is finally broken.
Oh, this gives me chills.
Because Ingrid mentions a newer specialist terror named Mary who has made incredible progress with Gabriella. So much progress that Gabriella has actually started to whisper. And suddenly they hear footsteps approaching the door. Gabriella turns, her lips part, and out comes this wheezing, terrifying whisper from vocal cords that haven't been used in a decade. She whispers, "Run, rabbit, run, rabbit, run, run, run."
The visceral horror of that moment is just brilliant.
It's just like something out of a horror movie.
It is. It's a nursery rhyme, which completely fits her 8-year-old mental state, but it operates as a desperate primal warning system.
A warning to Carter.
Exactly. Her subconscious is reacting to the person on the other side of that door.
Because the person who walks in completely shatters Carter's reality. It's a woman in a white uniform with a Mary name badge, but Carter recognizes her instantly.
Yep.
It's Eden Fox, the woman he believed was dead. The woman whose presumed mangled body is currently lying in a morgue.
The woman he kissed.
Yes, the woman he recently kissed.
The cognitive dissonance Carter experiences here is astronomical. I mean, his brain has to simultaneously process that a dead woman is alive, that a medical carer is actually a wife, and that he has physically interacted with a ghost.
It's too much for one person to process.
And Mary recognizes him, too. She locks eyes with him, realizes her cover is blown, and she bolts.
We get this incredibly surreal chase scene. Carter is sprinting through the facility, dodging wealthy teenagers eating breakfast off crystal and white linen in the dining room.
What a contrast.
Yeah, chasing a supposedly dead woman out into the parking lot. He runs out just in time to see her jump into a red Mini. He tries to block her, but she slams on the gas and nearly runs him over.
Typical Carter luck.
But here is what really fascinates me. When Carter goes back inside panting, having just nearly been killed by Eden Fox, the nurse, Ingrid, simply refuses to believe him.
This is the absolute pinnacle of the selective blindness theme we've been tracking.
It drives me crazy.
Ingrid looks at a frantic, breathing police officer and says, "I am telling you that you are mistaken." Why? Because Ingrid has paperwork.
Right.
She has background checks. She has a file that explicitly says this woman is Mary Kendall.
That's madness. How does a person look reality in the face and choose the file folder?
Because accepting the reality means accepting that your entire institutional security system is a joke.
Oh, that's a good point.
It means accepting that you've been living alongside a phantom. The human brain protects itself from paradigm-shifting shocks by doubling down on established protocols?
So it's a defense mechanism.
Entirely. Ingrid's bacon and eggs is her paperwork. If the paperwork says Mary, it's Mary. And we do this all the time in everyday life.
Did you?
Think about how often people ignore massive red flags in relationships or corporate fraud or political corruption simply because the official narrative, the paperwork, says everything is fine.
That is so true. And Carter is just as guilty of manipulating the paperwork. Because while he's dealing with the Mary revelation, Birdie is back in Hope Falls unraveling a lie Carter himself told.
Oh, the dog walker.
Yes. Carter had sent Birdie an official transcript of his interview with Old Stu, the local dog walker. But Birdie decides to go and interview Stu herself.
Contrast the sterile institutional blindness of the manor with the messy, gritty reality of Old Stu's cottage.
It's night and day.
Birdie steps into a thatched roof cottage that smells overwhelmingly of wet dog and burnt toast.
Gross.
She's swarmed by a sausage dog, a lab, and a pug.
And Old Stu, who is dressed like an elderly surfer dude and is highly annoyed by her presence, completely blows up Carter's story.
He does?
Birdie asks Stu about the second woman he supposedly saw chasing Eden Fox up the cliff the morning she disappeared. And Stu looks at her like she has two heads. He insists vehemently that he only ever saw one woman.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means Carter completely fabricated a suspect.
He made it up.
She falsified an official police transcript. He invented a second woman out of thin air.
This makes me question everything about Carter. I have to ask you, is Carter a fundamentally good cop whose personal life makes him reckless, or is he actually a terrible, corrupt cop who just occasionally stumbles onto the truth?
I don't think it's a binary, honestly.
Yeah.
He is a deeply flawed man trying to navigate an ethical maze with a completely broken compass. Both are protagonists. Birdie and Carter are actively deceiving each other while trying to uncover the town's deception.
Right, the intercepting lies.
Carter lied on that transcript to protect a working theory he had. He suspected the narrative was wrong, and he manipulated the evidence to keep the investigation open in the direction he wanted.
Which is super illegal.
It's noble in intent, perhaps, but entirely corrupt in execution.
That broken compass is perfectly illustrated by Carter's domestic life, which is the third major structural pillar of this narrative, the architecture of deception and moral traps.
Yeah, let's get into his home life.
Because after Harrison Wolfe finds out Carter visited Gabriella, Harrison storms the police station and demands Carter be fired. Birdie uses this as an excuse to officially suspend Carter to get him out of the firing line.
Right.
But that suspension forces Carter back to the one place he's desperately trying to avoid, his own house.
The backstory of Carter's marriage to Jane is a masterclass in how rigid, unexamined morality can destroy a life.
It's so sad.
Have you ever stayed in a situation simply because you felt it's the right thing to do at the time, only to realize the moral weight of that choice has slowly crushed you?
Oof, yeah.
That is Carter's entire existence.
It's tragicomic. Because they weren't high school sweethearts deeply in love, it was a drunken New Year's Eve hookup. Jane was in the year below him. He wasn't particularly attracted to her, but they slept together.
Right.
And 2 months later, she's pregnant.
And here is where his broken compass locks into place. He supported her keeping the baby because it was the right thing to do.
Quotation marks around that.
They moved into a tiny cottage with a massive mortgage together because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
They got married because it was the right thing to do. He repeats it like an incantation to ward off his own misery.
He trapped himself in a loveless shotgun marriage as a form of self-punishment for a mistake. He even refuses to wear a wedding ring, claiming they couldn't afford to, but internally he admits he just hates what it represents. He loves his baby daughter, Starin, which means star in Cornish, by the way, a beautifully delicate detail, but he is just suffocating.
And this directly answers your earlier question about whether he's a good or bad cop.
How so?
That domestic suffocation is the exact engine driving his professional recklessness. Because he feels completely trapped by doing the right thing in his personal life, he unconsciously rebels by becoming a risk taker,
A rule breaker.
a rule breaker, and a liar in his police work. His professional life is literally the only arena where he allows himself to break the rules.
So Carter walks into his kitchen, dreading telling Jane he's been suspended and they might lose the house. Jane is there in her denim dungarees and animal slippers, making a homemade lasagna.
A very domestic scene.
Very. But she's set 3 places at the table. Carter naturally assumes his mother-in-law is coming, but Jane casually drops a tactical nuke on his reality.
Yeah.
She says, "Your new boss is coming over."
This raises an important question about the psychological tension of this dinner scene, because it is excruciating.
I was sweating reading it.
It plays out like a hostage negotiation where the hostage taker doesn't even know they have a hostage.
That's hilarious and true.
Jane invited Bertie purely out of kindness, thinking Carter was stressed about his new superior. She has absolutely no idea that her husband was tangled in the sheets with this exact woman less than 24 hours ago.
It's a ticking bomb sitting under a plate of lasagna.
Lolly.
Bertie arrives, takes in this chaotic, baby-filled domestic reality, and you see her brutal internal judgments. She categorizes Jane as a plain Jane, wondering why a guy with Carter's ambitions settled for this life.
She's very harsh.
But she plays along. She sips water while Jane cheerfully tries to pour wine.
But the moment Jane leaves the room to check the high-tech baby monitor, the facade drops entirely.
Oh, yeah.
The silence in that kitchen is deafening. Carter reduces himself to a groveling mess. He whispers desperately, "Please don't tell her. I'll do anything you want. I'll walk your dog, clean your scooter."
It's so pathetic. But Bertie doesn't offer pity. She offers a wake-up call.
She does.
She points out that he has a real family, a child, a home, things that people, especially someone staring down a terminal diagnosis like Bertie, would kill for.
Right.
She tells him to pull himself together and reveals she only suspended him to get the furious Harrison Wolf out of the station. And this is the pivot point.
The shift.
Carter stops groveling. He realizes he isn't entirely doomed. He reaches over, pulls Jane's pink laptop right onto the kitchen table next to the lasagna, and pitches his masterpiece, the two wives theory.
This is the moment where Carter's chaotic pattern recognition style of policing finally clicks into place.
It's brilliant.
It really is brilliant. He lays out the physical evidence he found on the cliff path, a silver keychain engraved with Eden. He pulls up a website on the pink laptop showing photographs of the real Eden fox, and he synthesizes all the bizarre anomalies of the case for Bertie.
Let's walk through the mechanics of his theory because it recontextualizes the entire story. Remember the woman Carter arrested a few days ago?
Yeah.
The one who was screaming in the street, claiming her husband had changed the locks on her while she was out running.
Right, the woman everyone assumed was just having a mental breakdown.
Exactly. Carter realizes that woman was telling the absolute truth. She was the real Eden fox.
Wow.
Harrison had locked her out of her own life. And the Mary they saw at the manor, the carer who whispered to Gabriella, she was hired by Harrison to physically impersonate Eden to the entire village of Hope Falls.
It's insane.
Mary played Eden at the art gallery. Mary played Eden to the neighbors.
It's an elaborate architectural deception, but Carter takes it to its devastating, logical conclusion.
So what does this all mean?
Well, if Mary is impersonating Eden, and the real Eden was locked out, who is the mangled, unidentifiable body they found at the bottom of the cliffs at the local suicide spot?
It's the real Eden fox.
Exactly. Whether she was violently murdered by Harrison, or whether the psychological torture of having her identity stolen drove her to suicide, the result is the exact same.
She's dead.
She was eliminated so that Harrison and Mary could be together permanently, maintaining absolute control over the family fortune and over Gabriella.
Bertie's mind is completely blown by this. She realizes her rogue mess of a sergeant has actually cracked the foundation of the case.
He actually did it.
They immediately abandon the awkward lasagna dinner, leaving Jane completely in the dark, of course, because they have to confront Harrison Wolf before he realizes they know the truth.
Right.
Which brings us to our final theme. The sins of the past and the hubris of the present. Because their march to Harrison's house, Spyglass, happens against the most surreal, thematic backdrop possible.
The Day of the Dead Festival in Hope Falls.
Yes. They step out of the quiet cottage and are instantly swallowed by a massive mob of villagers. Everyone has their faces painted like elaborate skulls carrying flaming torches marching through the streets.
The visual is stunning.
It is loud, it is chaotic, and it is drenched in symbolism. They are literally weaving through an ocean of the dead to march toward a murderer's house.
It really amplifies the stakes. But as they approach Spyglass, Carter spots Mary's red Mini parked in the driveway.
Oh, this part.
And this seemingly innocuous detail triggers a massive historical connection for Carter, one that exposes the deep veins of generational class resentment running beneath this entire story.
This blew my mind. Carter reveals to Bertie that he recognizes that specific red Mini. Years ago, it used to be parked outside this exact house, Spyglass, when Bertie's grandmother, old Mrs. Bird, lived there.
Yep.
Mary wasn't just a random carer Harrison found. She was the live-in carer for Bertie's grandmother.
And the implications of that fact are the source of Carter's foundational trauma.
How so?
Carter explains that old Mrs. Bird claimed she ran out of money paying for Mary's exorbitant care fees. Because of those fees, Mrs. Bird was forced to call in debts, which resulted in the forced sale of the local pub, the Smuggler's Inn.
The pub that was owned by Carter's parents.
Exactly. The forced sale of that pub financially ruined Carter's family. It destroyed his parents' livelihood. And in Carter's mind, the immense stress of that financial ruin is what caused his mother's cancer.
So if you look at the architecture of the narrative, this one house on the cliff, Spyglass, and this one carer, Mary, are the nexus of all the pain in Carter's life.
They represent everything he hates.
He resents the Bird family wealth, which destroyed his family. He resents Harrison Wolfe's wealth, which allows him to buy people like Mary. The narrative ties all these characters together in a tight, suffocating knot of privilege, exploitation, and resentment.
It means that for Carter, arresting Harrison isn't just about solving a murder anymore. It is about balancing a cosmic scale of justice against the wealthy class that chewed up his family.
Armed with all of this, they reach the door of Spyglass. They actually intercept Diana Harris from the local art gallery, who is bringing a casserole to comfort the grieving Harrison.
That was a funny moment.
Birdie hilariously brushes her off, waiting till she's just out of earshot to mutter, "Off you fuck."
Very professional.
Right. Then they pound on the door. Harrison opens it, dripping with arrogance. He tries to shut them down, telling them to speak to his solicitor. But Birdie doesn't play his game. She lays out the two wives theory right there on the doorstep. She tells him flat out, "We know Mary Kendall was impersonating your wife."
Harrison's reaction is fascinating here. He pauses, calculates the angles, and then, bizarrely, invites them inside.
Which is terrifying.
Carter's instincts are screaming that they're walking into a trap. The house is freezing, the heating is off, the lights are dim.
He even jumps when he drops his own copy of Frankenstein from his secret library door earlier.
Yeah.
He's so on edge.
Right, he's terrified of his own creations. And crucially, Carter spots two packed suitcases sitting at the bottom of the stairs.
Harrison and Mary were literally hours away from fleeing the country. They are in the kitchen, and the tension is off the charts. Harrison is mocking Carter, referring to him as Sergeant Cockup.
Just brutal.
He thinks he holds all the cards. But then, Carter's phone buzzes. It's a text from the coroner's office. The DNA sample they took from Eden's hairbrush does not match the DNA of the mangled body on the beach.
Now, you would think this is bad news for the detectives, and Harrison certainly thinks it is his get-out-of-jail-free card.
He's so smug about it.
He smirks at them and says, "You can't arrest me for killing my wife if the body isn't my wife." He thinks the algorithmic logic of the law will save him.
But his arrogance is his absolute undoing, because Carter pushes back. He bluffs, saying they don't need DNA. They still have dental records to check against the body.
And here is where the genius creator of the Thanatos predictive algorithm makes a catastrophic amateur mistake. Reacting to the threat of dental records, Harrison confidently snaps back, "Good luck with that."
Oh.
She didn't have any teeth left.
Boom. I have to stop and ask, why? Why does a man who thinks 10 steps ahead, who built a machine to outsmart death, make such a colossal slip of the tongue?
It's cognitive overload.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
When you were balancing a lie of that magnitude, 2 wives, a secret flight, a locked-up daughter, a murdered woman, your brain's processing power is just maxed out.
Right.
When Carter introduces a new, unexpected variable, like the dental records, Harrison's brain reaches for the fastest way to neutralize the threat.
Without thinking it through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Forgetting that the knowledge used to neutralize the threat is itself an admission of guilt. How could he possibly know the specific facial trauma of an unidentified body unless he was the one who threw her off the cliff?
He couldn't. Birdie doesn't miss a single beat. She steps right between Carter and Harrison, pulls out her handcuffs, and officially arrests Harrison Wolfe.
The takedown.
You watch the God complex completely crumble in real time. He looks defeated, and as he's being cuffed, he mutters this highly revealing line. He says, "There isn't anything I wouldn't do for my daughter."
Which is the ultimate tragic irony of this entire segment.
How so?
That is almost verbatim what Carter said to Birdie about his own daughter, Staryn, earlier that evening.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Here you have 2 men standing on opposite sides of the law, both actively using the concept of protecting their children to justify their horrific moral compromises.
Sits deep.
Harrison uses it to justify murder and deception. Carter uses it to justify a loveless marriage and a corrupted career.
It's brilliant mirroring. So Birdie sends Carter outside to wait for backup. And this is where we reach the final devastating sequence of this act. Birdie is left entirely alone in the dimly lit hallway of Spyglass.
Just waiting.
She is pacing. She is feeling the physical pain of her illness radiating through her body. She is actively wondering why she chose to spend her final precious days investigating a murder in Hope Falls instead of resting.
Right.
And then she stops. She looks at a photograph that has just been newly hung on the wall.
It is a photograph of Gabriella Wolfe at 8 years old, taken just days before the bicycle accident that shattered her mind.
Right.
Harrison had just hung it up to cover a picture of the real Eden.
Birdie looks at the face of this 8-year-old girl, and her blood runs completely cold because she recognizes Gabriella.
The narrative violently yanks us back 10 years. We are placed inside Birdie's memory. She was a highly ambitious junior detective. She had just secured a massive promotion and was determined to be the youngest DCI in the country.
She was celebrating.
She had a pub with her colleagues, celebrating. She was drinking heavily.
And she got a dispatch call about a missing 8-year-old child in Blackmore National Park. Birdie, desperate to be the hero, drops everything. She gets in her car.
Even though she was drinking.
Yes. It's raining heavily. It's pitch black. And she admits to herself in this memory that she was speeding wildly. She knew she was over the legal alcohol limit, but she justified it all because she was rushing to save a child.
And the pieces snap together with horrifying clarity. We know Gabriella was in a terrible, mind-breaking accident on those dark roads 10 years ago.
Yes.
We know Birdie was speeding, drunk, through that exact area at that exact time.
It leaves this suffocating realization hanging in the air. We have to reckon with the very real possibility that the great, morally righteous DCI Olivia Bird, the woman who just arrested a man for his lies, might be the one who caused the accident that broke Gabriella Wolfe's mind.
It's wild.
The investigator might actually be the original monster of the story she is trying to solve.
It completely reframes her terminal illness, too. Is her ticking death clock a tragic twist of fate? Or is it a delayed cosmic consequence for a hit and run she buried a decade ago?
It forces us to ask a profound question about human nature and the secrets we keep. Think about the concept of moral luck for a second.
Yep.
If Birdie had been speeding drunk that night but happened to make it home without hitting anything, she would still be viewed as a decorated hero today. Her actions were exactly the same, but the unseen outcome changes everything.
That's a really good point.
Does the tragic outcome of our hidden mistakes define our ultimate morality? Or are we all just driving blind in the dark, hoping our worst decisions don't eventually catch up to us? So just imagine you are Sergeant Carter right now. We are dropping right into the final, the really explosive act of the story we've been unraveling.
Right, the absolute climax of it all.
Exactly. And our mission right now is to unpack this narrative that starts as a claustrophobic locked room mystery, but it just spirals into this 10-year web of gaslighting, artificial intelligence, and, pure revenge. So picture yourself as Carter.
Okay, I'm Carter.
You are a local cop. You're a guy who is used to, village disputes and the occasional pub brawl. You've been pushed around for days by your intimidating, highly eccentric new boss from London, DCI Olivia Bird.
Birdie.
Right, Birdie. And you are in Spyglass, this wonky, isolated, freezing cliffside house. You just discovered a secret tunnel behind a sliding bookcase in the library, right? You step inside this dark stone passage and instantly, wham, the world just goes black.
It is a physical manifestation of the dark he's been kept in all along. Like, when Carter wakes up, the sensory details the author gives us are just suffocating.
Oh, totally. The damp earth.
The smell of damp earth, yeah. And the sea salt. The blood drying on his head. He's literally locked inside that tunnel. And the person sitting on the other side of that heavy wooden door, the person who just assaulted him and locked him in, is his boss, DCI Birdie.
Which is insane. It completely shatters the expected detective dynamic.
It really does. I mean, a locked room in a mystery is usually a puzzle, right? An intellectual exercise for the detective to solve. But here, it is a tomb. Carter's authority is completely stripped away.
Yeah, and Birdie is using that physical barrier, that heavy door, to force him to listen to what is essentially a deathbed confession.
And what a confession it is.
Seriously. So Carter is bleeding in the dark. He's trying to figure out how all of this ties back to Harrison Wolfe, the wealthy, arrogant tech CEO who is involved in their missing persons case. And Birdie, sitting on the library floor on the other side, just casually drops a nuclear bomb.
She knows Harrison.
Not just knows him, she was married to him.
Right. And the way she frames this past relationship to Carter is deeply cynical. But it is incredibly revealing about her psychological state.
How so?
Well, she tells Carter that she thinks marriage, or like love in general, just bent them out of shape. She describes love as this filter that temporarily tricks your brain into seeing something ugly as something beautiful.
Oh, that is bleak.
It's so bleak. But she says once that filter lifts, the resentment is toxic.
Yeah.
You don't just see the person for who they actually are, you actively despise them for who you thought they were.
Which recontextualizes everything we know about Birdie up to this point. I mean, this tattooed, hardened, reclusive cop from London used to be married to a billionaire tech mogul.
Living the high life.
Exactly, but that is just the primer. The real payload of this confession, the thing that hits Carter the hardest, is about Gabriella.
The 18-year-old girl in the coma clinic.
Yeah, the girl who hasn't spoken a single word in 10 years. Birdie tells Carter, shouting through this thick wooden door, that Gabriella is her biological daughter.
Which means every single quirk, every abrasive edge, every ounce of Birdie's isolation stems from one single catastrophic moment a decade ago.
We really have to look at the anatomy of that trauma to understand her current actions, don't we?
We do. Because 10 years ago, Birdie wasn't a recluse. She wasn't the cynical loner. She was an incredibly ambitious, high-functioning woman. She was on the fast track to becoming the UK's youngest detective chief inspector.
So let's break down that moment, because the details of it are pure agony to read. It's a decade ago, it is night, it is pouring rain, Birdie is driving home, and she's exhausted from a grueling shift.
Right.
Her cell phone rings. She takes her eyes off the wet road for a second, maybe 2 seconds. And when she looks back, she hits the brakes, but the momentum is already there, and she feels the thump.
The visual imprint of that night basically becomes her personal purgatory. She gets out of the car, and she sees her 8-year-old daughter's bicycle pinned underneath the bumper.
Oh, God.
And then she sees Gabriella. She describes her lying on the shiny, rain-slicked tarmac, looking like a discarded, broken doll.
That imagery is just haunting.
And then comes the silence, right? Followed by the chaos of the flashing blue lights. The psychological devastation here isn't just grief. It is absolute crushing culpability.
She blames herself completely.
Entirely. She believes her own ambition, her own exhaustion, her own distraction is what shattered her child.
And the toll that takes on a human being is almost incomprehensible. Birdie just exiles herself from her own life. While Gabriella is in a coma for months, undergoing all these surgeries, Birdie doesn't even visit the hospital.
Which is hard to read.
It is. She tells Carter that Harrison looked at her with such pure hatred that she simply stayed away. She transfers to a different police force. She stops driving entirely. She stops drinking alcohol. She actively abstains from anything resembling joy or comfort.
It is a self-imposed life sentence.
Huh?
She doesn't want therapy. She doesn't want closure. She wants to live inside the guilt because she believes it's the only thing she actually deserves.
She turns her life into a monument to that single second of distraction. But hold on a second, because I'm looking at this timeline we've mapped out, and I have to say, I'm struggling to buy this one specific piece.
Which part?
Okay, as a reader, you hear this and you think, all right, horrific tragedy, the guilt makes perfect sense. But if Birdie was married to Harrison back then and living in that house, how on earth does she completely miss the fact that Harrison was carrying on a full-blown affair with their 21-year-old nanny, Eden?
Yes. The nanny.
Because Eden is the second wife who recently went missing, right?
Hi.
How does a top-tier, highly trained detective miss her husband sleeping with the nanny under her own roof?
I know. It seems like a massive blind spot.
Right.
But it is actually a very common psychological phenomenon, especially for people in incredibly high-pressure roles.
Really? Like even for a detective?
Even for a detective, when you are operating at maximum cognitive capacity at work, your home becomes a place where you simply cannot afford to analyze every detail. You turn off the analytical part of your brain just to survive.
I guess that's that old boiling frog myth, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
You put a frog in tepid water and slowly turn up the heat, and it doesn't notice until it's boiling. Birdie was in the pot. She was drowning in the demands of this intense career, trying to be a mother, trying to be a wife, and she was just profoundly exhausted.
Right.
You don't notice the temperature of your own marriage changing because you are relying on the help to keep you sane. You trust the nanny because you literally have to trust the nanny just to keep your head above water.
That blind trust is a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And to her credit, Birdie takes full ownership of that blind spot later in the confession. She admits to Carter that she was the one who hired Eden.
She brought her into the house.
She did. She was so grateful to have this young, energetic woman taking the domestic burden off her shoulders that she just didn't look too closely at the dynamic between Eden and Harrison. The betrayal happened in her periphery because she was too exhausted to focus on it.
Which brings us to the present-day collision. If Bertie destroyed her own life, gave up her husband, and abandoned her daughter out of this monumental guilt, what on earth could possibly drive her to team up with Harrison 10 years later to murder that former nanny?
Right, because to bridge that 10-year gap, we really have to examine the catalyst, the external force that shatters Bertie's stasis.
And that force is a piece of technology.
Yes, an artificial intelligence algorithm developed by a company called Thanatos.
This is where the story shifts from a really sad domestic tragedy into something deeply unsettling. 6 months prior to this night with Carter in the tunnel, Brody gets a letter in the mail from Thanatos.
The tech conglomerate.
Yeah, this massive tech conglomerate that Harrison used to run, and they claim to have cracked the code on human mortality. By harvesting your DNA, your medical history, your online habits, and millions of other data points, they claim they can predict the exact date of your death.
The juxtaposition of the profound, ancient mystery of death with cold corporate marketing is so chilling. The letter she gets literally welcomes her to the Thanatos family and wishes her a happy death day.
A happy death day. It's so dystopian. And it gives her a date, November 2nd.
Today, the day she is talking to Carter.
Exactly. Today.
Facing absolute certainty about your own mortality removes the luxury of procrastination. When a person believes they have all the time in the world, they can put off painful confrontations.
Oh, for sure. You always say, I'll deal with that tomorrow.
Exactly. But when Bertie gets this letter, and she truly believes she only has 6 months left to live, her priorities undergo an instant, violent crystallization. She decides she cannot die without seeing Gabriella one last time. She has to look her daughter in the eye and apologize.
So she goes to the manor, this high-end, highly restrictive, almost fortress-like institution where Gabriella has been living. And remember, Gabriella hasn't spoken a word in a decade.
Not a single syllable.
Her vocal cords work fine, but the trauma just locked her voice away entirely. She only communicates through these intense, childlike paintings. When she's sad, she paints wolves. When she's scared, she paints foxes. When she's happy, she paints birds.
Which is such a striking detail. The trauma essentially arrested her emotional development. Her mind built a fortress around the mentality of an 8-year-old child to protect itself from the horrors of the adult world.
So Bertie walks into that clinic, and she is terrified. She fully expects to see a stranger, an 18-year-old woman she doesn't know who probably hates her.
Right.
But the moment she walks in, Gabriella drops her paintbrush. She stares at Bertie, and after 10 years of absolute silence, she opens her mouth and whispers one word, Mommy.
I mean, it is the breaking of the dam. The medical staff at the clinic note that seeing Bertie was the specific psychological key required to unlock Gabriella's voice.
Because the mother wasn't the source of the fear.
Exactly. The mother was the safe harbor all along. And once that first word is out, the floodgates just open.
Day after day, Bertie goes back to the clinic. And day after day, Gabriella starts whispering new words, clues, fragments of memory. And through these whispers, combined with the help of a quiet caregiver named Mary, Bertie pieces together the horrifying truth of what actually happened that rainy night 10 years ago.
And the reality is far, far worse than the tragic accident Bertie had been punishing herself for.
So much worse. Because it wasn't an accident at all. Gabriella was playing hide and seek. It was her favorite game. She hid inside her mother's large wardrobe in the master bedroom.
Just a normal kid playing a game.
Yeah. And while she was in there, she caught Harrison and Eden in bed together.
It is the ultimate corruption of childhood innocence. A simple game turns into a front row seat to the destruction of her family.
When Harrison leaves the room, the 8-year-old steps out of the wardrobe. She confronts Eden. She threatens to tell her mother what she saw. And this is the moment Eden Fox transforms from a deceitful 21-year-old nanny into an absolute monster.
Eden's reaction here is a masterclass in calculated psychopathy.
Yeah.
It is not just a momentary panic. She doesn't just yell at the kid. She grabs the child, drags her out into the hallway, and pushes her over the banister.
A full story drop.
Yes. Gabriella falls a full story and shatters her body on the hard stone floor below.
The violence of that is sickening. But what Eden does next is what makes my blood run completely cold. She looks over the banister, she sees the broken child, and she does nothing.
Nothing at all.
She leaves Gabriella bleeding on the stone floor for hours. She just waits for it to get dark outside.
And this is where we separate a crime of passion from pure sociopathy. Eden didn't call an ambulance. Her brain immediately ran a risk assessment.
Like a machine.
Like a machine. If the child lives, the affair is exposed, the wealthy lifestyle is gone, and she goes to prison. If the child dies, she can manage the narrative. She chose to protect her luxury lifestyle over the life of an 8-year-old girl.
Once it gets dark, Eden drags this child's broken body out of the house. She drives her down the driveway and places her in the middle of the road along with her bicycle to stage a hit and run.
It's just so calculating.
And then, the true masterpiece of manipulation. Eden called Harrison, panicking, saying the child is missing. Harrison calls the police. The police dispatch Bertie, who is already rushing home in the pouring rain. And Eden stands by the front window watching the road with her cell phone in her hand.
The timing is malevolent. It's so precise. Eden waits until the exact second she sees the headlights of Bertie's car turning onto their street. And then she dials Bertie's number.
Because she knows her.
She knows that a mother, terrified for her missing child, will look down at her ringing phone.
It works perfectly. Bertie looks away for that split second. She hits the bike. She sees her daughter in the road. And in that horrifying moment, Eden entirely rewrites reality. She ensures that Bertie believes, to her very core, that she was the one who caused those catastrophic injuries.
Eden didn't just push a child over a banister. She stole a woman's entire reality. She stole Bertie's sanity, her marriage, her motherhood, her career, and a decade of her life. All in one orchestrated moment of gaslighting. She literally framed the mother for the attempted murder of her own child.
And it brings up this fascinating philosophical point that Harrison talks about later in the manuscript. He has this whole theory behind the Thanatos algorithm.
Right, about accountability.
Yeah. He believes that humanity's biggest problem is a lack of accountability. He literally says, when you remove consequences, you get chaos. People turn into absolute monsters when they figure out how to avoid paying the price for their actions.
And Eden is the living embodiment of his theory. She figured out how to remove the consequences of her actions by placing the burden of guilt entirely onto Bertie's shoulders. She lived a life of luxury, married the billionaire, and slept peacefully in the house where she nearly murdered a child, precisely because she suffered zero consequences.
So, cut back to the present. You have Bertie, who just realized she spent 10 years in a self-imposed hell for a crime she didn't commit. You have Harrison, who just found out his beautiful young wife crippled his daughter. And you have Mary, the caregiver, who helped them uncover the truth.
The syndicate.
Right. How do these three wildly different people sit down and form a murder syndicate?
Well, they are bound by a convergence of deeply powerful yet entirely distinct motivations. If we dissect the syndicate, Bertie's motivation is the most visceral and relatable. It is pure, unadulterated vengeance. She says, "She stole my life from me, so I stole hers." It is an eye for an eye.
But Harrison's motive is much colder. It's entirely pragmatic. He wants to be rid of Eden, sure. He's disgusted by what she did, but he is a billionaire. Why not just go to the police with the new evidence?
Because of the money.
It's always the money.
Always. Harrison's wealth is entirely tied up in Thanatos. He's on the verge of selling the company for billions. He cannot afford a massive public scandal involving his wife attempting to murder his daughter. More importantly, he was arrogant. He never signed a prenuptial agreement with Eden.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If he divorces her, the woman who crippled his child is legally entitled to half of his empire. He literally cannot afford to let her live. Divorce is ruin. Murder is protection.
And then there's Mary, the quiet, unassuming caregiver from the clinic. Why on earth is she risking prison to help these two wealthy people kill someone?
Mary's grievance is a story of class warfare and deep, deep betrayal. She worked at Spyglass for nearly 2 decades. She was the primary caregiver for Bertie's grandmother. She did the grueling, invisible, intimate labor, washing her, feeding her, cleaning up her bodily fluids.
And she did it all on minimum wage.
Yes. Why? Because the grandmother continually promised Mary that when she died, she would leave the Spyglass estate to Mary in her will.
It was an unspoken contract, sweat equity for a massive inheritance.
Exactly. But when the grandmother died, she didn't leave the house to Mary. She left it to her granddaughter, Bertie.
So Mary felt robbed of 20 years of her life.
Completely.
Yeah.
The family essentially extracted her youth for cheap labor and then just discarded her. She infiltrated the clinic where Gabriella was staying, specifically to get close to the family that now owned her house. Her price for acting as the linchpin in this murder plot is absolute financial security.
Harrison agrees to buy Spyglass and sign the deed over to Mary.
Plus, give her enough money to live comfortably in Switzerland forever.
Okay, so they have the motives, they have the team. Now we have to look at the master plan, which is incredibly intricate but fundamentally flawed.
Very flawed.
Their goal isn't just to kill Eden, it's to torture her first. They want to systematically gaslight her, driving her to the edge of madness, culminating in a fake suicide. They start moving things around Spyglass, they clear out her belongings, they plant a spare phone in her car so they can track her every movement.
They want her to feel the exact same loss of reality that Birdie felt for 10 years.
Yeah.
The trap is meticulously set. Harrison sends Eden a text from a burner phone, telling her to meet him at the Waterfall Cliff, a local spot that's notorious for suicides. But Harrison isn't going to the cliff. Birdie is.
Birdie's job is to meet Eden at the top of the cliff, look her in the eye, tell her they know exactly what she did to Gabriella, and then physically push her off the edge.
A poetic, brutal execution.
But here is the massive glitch, the wrench in the gears of this multi-million-dollar conspiracy. When Birdie actually arrives at the top of the cliff, Eden is already gone.
The entire plan fractures at the very moment of execution. Birdie arrives, geared up to commit murder, and finds an empty cliffside.
Which brings us to the most confusing part for the local police, and for Carter, the DNA decoy. A few days later, a body washes up on the beach in Blackwater Bay. It is a woman, blonde hair, matching Eden's general description, but the face has been completely destroyed by the rocks in the water.
Right.
If Birdie didn't push Eden, whose body is this?
The syndicate is just as confused as the police. They assume it must be Eden. They think perhaps the gaslighting worked too well and she jumped on her own, or maybe she slipped. But here's where their premeditation really comes into play. They had planned for Eden's body to be found eventually.
I needed a buffer.
Exactly. They needed the police to be confused long enough for them to execute the rest of their escape plan. So before Eden vanished, Mary deliberately planted her own hairbrush among the few belongings left at Spyglass for the police to find.
It is a brilliant forensic countermeasure.
Isn't it?
When the crime scene investigators take that hairbrush and run the DNA against the unrecognizable body on the beach, it will intentionally mismatch.
It creates a bureaucratic nightmare for the police. The body won't match the missing woman's belongings. It buys the syndicate weeks, maybe even months of time. Time they need to quietly sell off the tech company, move their assets, and slide Mary into Gabriella's life as a permanent live-in carer in Switzerland.
Without anyone even confirming the real Eden is officially dead. But they didn't count on Sergeant Carter. He started digging too deep, asking too many questions about the missing wife, which is why Birdie knocked him out and locked him in the tunnel in the first place.
Which brings us right back to that heavy wooden door. Birdie is explaining all of this to Carter, piece by piece, through the wood.
And she drops another massive piece of information about the cleanup. She tells Carter that Harrison has quietly finalized the sale of his multi-billion-dollar company, Thanatos, and with a fraction of that money, he bought the local pub in the village, the Smuggler's Inn.
Which just happens to be the pub owned by Carter's family.
Right. Harrison bought the pub, paid off all of the family's crippling debts, and is putting the deed in Carter's name. It is a staggering, life-changing bribe.
Hush money on a grand scale.
Exactly. While Carter is locked in the tunnel, Harrison, Mary, and Gabriella are currently driving to a private airfield to flee to Switzerland. The bribe is meant to ensure that when Carter gets out of the tunnel, he keeps his mouth shut forever.
It is a desperate attempt by capital to buy a clean slate. They are throwing money at the problem to bury the truth.
And what is Birdie doing while she is telling him all this? She is sitting on the floor of the library, gathering every single pill she can find. Morphine, painkillers, whatever is left in the house. She has cancer. And she fully believes the Thanatos prediction that November 2nd today is her final day on Earth.
But she refuses to let an algorithm dictate the terms of her end.
Exactly. She's swallowing massive handfuls of pills. If she is going to die today, she's going to choose the hour and the method. It is a tragically defiant final act. She believes she has secured her daughter's financial and physical future. She believes justice has been served to Eden. And now her watch is over.
It is the ultimate exertion of free will in the face of absolute data-driven determinism.
I am right there with Carter in this moment, screaming at the door, because there is a massive gaping hole in this story. Carter is yelling at her through the wood. If you didn't push Eden, and Harrison and Mary swear they didn't push Eden, who did?
The math doesn't add up.
It doesn't. Are we to believe she just jumped? Or worse, is Eden Fox still alive? Is she hiding in the secret tunnels of Spyglass right now, waiting to strike?
The narrative tension here is masterful. We have been presented with a tightly wound 10-year conspiracy of revenge, but the central act of violence, the murder of Eden Fox, remains entirely unsolved. The syndicate built the trap, but someone else sprang it.
It is infuriating in the best possible way. Carter is bleeding in a pitch-black tunnel trying to break down a door, knowing the true killer might be roaming the village. And as Bertie's consciousness begins to fade from the massive overdose, the atmosphere in the library takes a hard turn into gothic horror.
Oh, the hallucination scene.
The drugs take hold and she hallucinates. She looks up and sees a terrifying woman standing in the doorway of the library. A woman dressed head to toe as a Day of the Dead skeleton bride.
So creepy.
Wide, wild eyes staring down at Bertie, whispering, "I hate you."
The psychological decay of Bertie's mind blends seamlessly with the haunting history of the house. It really feels like the ghosts of Spyglass are finally coming to collect her.
As Bertie's eyes roll back and she fades to black, the narrative violently shifts back to Carter. He realizes he cannot break down the door. Bertie is dying on the other side. His only option is to turn around and army crawl deeper into this claustrophobic, unmapped tunnel.
But before we follow Carter, we have to look at the parallel thread happening at this exact moment. Because while Carter is in the dark, Harrison is driving his Mini Cooper toward the airfield with Mary in the passenger seat.
Right.
But they aren't alone. Gabriella, the eternal player of hide-and-seek, has secreted herself in the back of the car.
She pops up from behind the seat and whispers to Harrison, "I love you to the moon and back." It terrifies him so badly he nearly crashes the car.
Gabriella's internal logic during this escape is fascinating. She understands that her father loves her and wants to protect her, but she vehemently rejects Mary. She refuses to accept this woman as her new third mummy.
After everything with Eden, yeah.
After Eden, and after a decade in an institution, Gabriella refuses to let history repeat itself. She will not allow another caregiver to take over her life. When the car eventually stops, she opens the door and runs away into the foggy night.
It is a profound moment of agency. The traumatized child is taking active control over her own survival.
Yes, she is finally making her own choices.
Back to Carter. He is crawling through the dirt and the dark. He finally bursts out the other end of the tunnel, and he emerges onto the beach of Blackwater Bay. And the contrast is jarring. He goes from total sensory deprivation to absolute sensory overload. He lands right in the middle of the village's massive Day of the Dead festival.
The visual juxtaposition is brilliant. He's surrounded by massive bonfires, fireworks exploding overhead, and hundreds of villagers wearing skeleton masks celebrating death while he is frantically trying to prevent one.
He is sprinting through the sand, fighting his way through the crowds, racing toward the road to get back to the front door of Spyglass to save Bertie. He runs past his family's pub, the Smuggler's Inn, and he notices it's completely dark.
Which is strange.
Which is incredibly strange, because this festival is the busiest, most profitable night of the year for the pub.
And here, amidst the chaos of the sprint, the narrative drops a seemingly minor, almost throwaway detail that holds the key to the entire mystery. Carter bumps into his sister, Maddie.
He practically tackles her on the dark lane leading up the hill. He's bleeding from the head, frantic, and he asks her what she's doing out of the pub. Maddie casually mentions that there was a power cut at the inn, so she just wandered up the hill to get some fresh air and watch the fireworks.
Carter's internal monologue flags this. He thinks it seems like a strange, bloody thing to do. Leaving a pub full of rowdy patrons during a power cut on the most lucrative night of the year to go for a solitary stroll in the dark.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. But his adrenaline is redlining. He doesn't have the time or the cognitive bandwidth to interrogate his sister's strange behavior.
He tells her to go home, and he keeps running. He gets to Spyglass, kicks down the heavy front door, and finds Bertie on the library floor. And she is clinically dead. No pulse, no breathing.
This is where the emotional core of Carter's character really solidifies. He is not a billionaire tech genius or a high-flying London detective. He is a local cop who cares deeply about life. He immediately begins relentless CPR.
He is breathing into her mouth, doing brutal chest compressions, cracking her ribs, and he is literally yelling at her. He is screaming at her to defy the Thanatos algorithm. He tells her she has to choose her own destiny because, for the first time in 10 long years, she actually has something to live for. She has Gabriella.
It is the philosophical climax of the narrative. The battle between deterministic fate, represented by the cold, calculating AI death date, and human willpower. Carter is trying to physically force the life back into her body through sheer, stubborn defiance.
And then the narrative jumps. We fast forward, 1 year later.
The quintessential epilogue. The dust has settled.
And it seems like the most perfect, tidy, happy ending you could possibly ask for. Bertie survived. The paramedics arrived, shocked her heart, and brought her back. She was clinically dead for 7 minutes, but she lived. And the most miraculous part, Her cancer went into unexplained complete remission. The tumors just started shrinking.
She attributes it to the fresh sea air and finally letting go of her guilt, but the narrative frames it almost as a cosmic reward. She chose life, she fought back against the machine, and the universe rewarded her.
She is living happily in Spyglass. She kept the house. She has a dog named Sunday. She goes for long, healthy runs on the coast path every morning. Harrison successfully sold his company, moved to Switzerland, and is properly caring for Gabriella. Gabriella even visits Bertie in Cornwall once a month, and they got matching swallow tattoos on their wrists.
If we reflect on the thematic resolution here, it is quite profound. The Sanditos AI was, technically speaking from a pure data standpoint, completely accurate.
Yeah.
Bertie did die on November 2nd.
Right on schedule, for 7 minutes.
But the algorithm was contextually wrong. And that highlights the massive danger of relying on raw data without human context. An AI can predict a biological failure, a heart stopping, but it cannot account for the variable of a stubborn local police sergeant refusing to stop CPR. It cannot quantify the sudden, fierce will to live a mother experiences upon being reunited with her lost child. It is a victory of human messy reality over sterile, predictive technology.
And it feels like Harrison's obsession with consequences is finally balanced out. Bertie accepted the consequences of surviving and forgiving herself. Harrison took responsibility for his daughter. And Eden got what she deserved. The universe is restored to order.
The chaotic world is stabilized. The villains are punished. The victims are healing.
But I am going to completely ruin this serene, happy mood right now.
As you should. The listener shouldn't get too comfortable.
The story isn't over. You are sitting there thinking, wow, what a great wrap-up. But the biggest loose end in the entire story hasn't been tied. We still do not know who pushed Eden Fox off the waterfall cliff. The syndicate didn't do it. And we still don't know who the terrifying skeleton bride was that Bertie hallucinated in the library while she was overdosing.
The author lulls us into this false sense of security with the 1 year later chapter wrapping everything in a neat bow, only to violently pull the rug out from under us in the final few pages.
The book shifts perspective one last time. We get a brand new narrator, a woman who describes herself in her own internal monologue as a plain Jane.
The titular perspective. The book is called My Husband's Wife, and we finally hear from her.
Let's drop the ultimate reveal right now. Connect the dots backwards. Carter mentioned earlier in the night that he longed for his simple, quiet life with Jane and Sterren. His sister, Maddie, wandering suspiciously in the dark during the power cut. This new narrator, Jane, is Carter's wife.
The quiet, supportive, completely invisible wife of the heroic local police sergeant.
Jane is the one who pushed Eden Fox off the waterfall cliff.
And her motive is an absolute masterclass in the mundane, terrifying horrors of petty jealousy. It has nothing to do with Gabriella's trauma. It has nothing to do with the grand 10-year conspiracy of revenge. It has nothing to do with Harrison's corporate tech empire or Mary's stolen inheritance.
It is so incredibly petty. Jane confesses her motive to us. She says that one day she decided to be a good wife and bring Carter some lunch at the police station to surprise him. She walks up to the building, looks through the glass window of his office, and sees a blonde woman sitting on Carter's desk. The woman has her back turned, and she is leaning in, kissing Carter.
Jane assumes, based on the blonde hair and the expensive clothes, that it is Eden Fox, the local wealthy artist and billionaire's wife who's been hanging around the station.
Out of pure, blind, jealous rage over a perceived affair, Jane, the overlooked, underappreciated housewife, follows Eden to the waterfall cliff. She bumps into her. Eden is arrogant, denies kissing Carter, calls Jane a fool, and turns her back. And Jane just pushes her. She pushes her right off the edge of the cliff into the rocky water below.
It is a stunning, brilliant subversion of the entire thriller genre. Think about how we've been trained to consume these stories. The narrative forces us to look at the extravagant, dramatic characters. We are analyzing the psychopathic nanny, the scarred detective, the billionaire CEO, the scheming caregiver with a 20-year grudge. We are looking for grand, cinematic motives.
We are looking at the fireworks.
Yes. And while we were blinded by the fireworks, the true killer was the completely invisible, plain housewife operating entirely in the shadows. Jane's own internal monologue states the core theme of the book perfectly. People always think it's the husband, but sometimes it's the wife.
But here is where it goes from a clever plot twist to a lingering existential nightmare. Jane wasn't done with just Eden. Jane confesses that later that night, when Carter came home at 4 a.m. smelling of another woman's expensive perfume, which was actually Bertie's perfume, from them working in close quarters during the investigation, Jane snapped again. She targeted Bertie.
The domino effect of untethered jealousy.
Jane is the one who showed up at Spyglass during the power cut. Remember Maddie wandering around? Maddie was covering for Jane. Bertie didn't hallucinate that skeleton bride. Jane went to the festival, put on the Day of the Dead costume, walked into Spyglass, and stood in the library. Jane actively watched Bertie overdose on those pills. She stood over her dying body, staring down at her, and whispered, "I hate you."
It completely recast that entire overdose scene. It wasn't a drug-induced manifestation of Bertie's internal guilt coming to haunt her. It was a physical, malevolent presence ensuring that she died. Jane was making sure her husband's perceived new lover was eliminated.
And Jane openly admits in this final chapter that she would have physically finished the job herself if Bertie hadn't already looked dead on the floor. Which means Jane is still out there.
This brings us to a deeply unsettling realization about the current status quo of these characters.
Okay.
The happy ending is a fragile illusion.
I want you to really mull this over. Picture Bertie right now, 1 year later. She is living happily in Spyglass. She thinks she has won the ultimate battle against fate. She thinks she is perfectly safe. She goes for a run on the beach every single morning. She's completely blissfully unaware that the woman who actually murdered Eden Fox, the woman who stood over her and actively wanted her dead, is Jane. And Jane is married to the local police sergeant who saved Bertie's life. Jane is perfectly hidden in plain sight, embedded in the local police force by proxy. She is watching Bertie run on that beach every single morning, just waiting.